Hey guys, welcome to Green Bean Fiction. So in today's video we are gonna see, what if Deku became Shanks and awakened Conqueror's Haki? Part 1. This story is Haki Hero, Deku as Shanks by Animelovernewguy. Before starting, make sure to hit that like button, as your one like motivates me to bring more stories, and subscribe the channel if you are new so you won't miss our latest videos. Izuku Midoriya had always been different from the other kids in his class. While most of his classmates had loud, flashy quirks that made them the center of attention, Izuku's life had been one of quiet determination. He had no quirk of his own, at least, not until the day he went to the quirk doctor. But before that, there was a moment that would change his life forever. He was just 6 years old, and the other kids at school were already starting to show off their abilities. It was lunchtime, and Izuku was eating alone, watching as Bakugo Katsuki and his gang of friends terrorized the smaller kids in the playground. "Hey, you!" Bakugo shouted at a frightened little boy holding a lunchbox. "Give me your food." Izuku's heart pounded in his chest. He couldn't stand bullying, and it always made him feel helpless. His fists clenched as he watched Bakugo grab the boy's lunch, throwing it onto the ground. "You don't deserve to eat," Bakugo sneered. Izuku stood up, his legs shaking. He couldn't let this happen, not this time. He wasn't strong like Bakugo, and he didn't have a quirk that would allow him to fight back, but there had to be something he could do. "Hey," Izuku called out, his voice shaking. "Stop it, Bakugo. That's not right." Bakugo turned around, a cruel smirk crossing his face. "What's this, Deku? You think you can stop me? You don't even have a quirk." "I don't care," Izuku shouted, stepping forward. "It's not right to hurt people just because you can." Bakugo's expression hardened, his eyes narrowing as he took a step toward Izuku. "You want to be a hero? Don't make me laugh." With a sudden movement, Bakugo raised his hand, preparing to launch an explosion in Izuku's direction. Izuku flinched, but before he could even react, something strange happened. A sharp, almost instinctive sense of awareness washed over him. His heart raced as his body seemed to move on its own. He ducked just in time, feeling the heat of Bakugo's explosion as it passed by him. But he didn't stop there. As Bakugo prepared for another attack, Izuku's senses heightened again. This time, he could see every movement Bakugo made before it happened. Izuku's legs moved on their own, dodging and weaving in ways he couldn't explain. His body felt stronger than it ever had before. With a burst of energy, he reached out and grabbed Bakugo's wrist, stopping the explosion in its tracks. Bakugo stared at him in disbelief. What the hell did you just do?" he growled, trying to free himself. Izuku, too, was just as surprised as Bakugo. He couldn't explain what had happened, how his body had moved so fluidly, how he had known exactly when to dodge. He just felt different, like something had awakened inside him. Before anything else could happen, the teacher rushed over, separating the two boys. Bakugo stormed off, muttering curses under his breath, but Izuku didn't pay him any mind. He was too focused on what had just occurred. For the first time in his life, Izuku felt like maybe, just maybe, he could become a hero. And it was all because of whatever that was. The next day, Izuku's mom, Inko Midoriya, took him to the quirk doctor, concerned about what had happened. She had always known that Izuku didn't have a typical quirk like the others, but this new ability was something she couldn't ignore. After a thorough examination, the doctor gave them his diagnosis. "Your son has a very rare quirk," the doctor said, his glasses gleaming as he adjusted them. "It's not like most others. It's not a physical manifestation or an elemental ability, but rather a mental and physical enhancement. This is what we call Haki." "Haki?" Inko asked, her brow furrowing in confusion. "What does that mean?" The doctor nodded, explaining, "Haki is a mysterious and powerful quirk that grants its user enhanced perception, focus, and strength. There are two distinct aspects to it: observation Haki, which allows the user to sense and predict movements and actions, and armament Haki, which enhances physical strength and fortifies the body. There may even be a third aspect, but it's impossible to say whether he has access to that yet." Izuku's mind raced as he processed the information. A quirk that enhanced his body and mind. This was exactly what he had needed. He had always felt weak, but with this newfound power, he could change that. He could become the hero he had always dreamed of. The next few weeks were a blur of training for Izuku. He spent every spare moment practicing with his newfound quirk, trying to control it. His observation haki allowed him to sense the smallest movements around him. It was as if the world slowed down, and he could predict what would happen before it even did. His armament haki allowed him to focus his energy into his limbs, making him stronger and more resilient. One afternoon, after a long session of training in the park, Izuku was sitting on a bench, panting and sweating. His body felt stronger, but he knew he still had a long way to go. There was still something missing, something that felt incomplete. "Mom," he called out, standing up as he ran toward his mother, who was waiting nearby. "I want to ask you something." Inko looked at him curiously. "What is it, Izuku?" Izuku hesitated, then spoke with determination. "I want to start sword training." Inko blinked, surprised by the request. "Sword training? But why a sword?" Izuku scratched the back of his head nervously, trying to explain. "I think it will help me focus my powers better. I've been practicing with my quirk, and I feel like having a sword in my hands will help me control it, give me discipline. Please, Mom, I think this is the way to unlock the full potential of my quirk." Inko looked at him, concern in her eyes. "A sword is dangerous, Izuku. You'll need proper guidance and training if you want to take this seriously." Izuku's face hardened with resolve. "I'll be careful, Mom. I promise. I need this. I want to become a hero." Seeing the unwavering determination in her son's eyes, Inko sighed softly. "All right, Izuku. If this is what you truly want, I'll support you. We'll find someone who can teach you." A week later, Inko took Izuku to a small dojo on the outskirts of town. It was a peaceful place, nestled away from the hustle and bustle of the city, where wooden practice swords clacked against one another in rhythmic harmony. The sensei, an elderly man named Master Hisao, agreed to take Izuku under his wing. "Are you ready?" Master Hisao asked, observing Izuku closely. "Sword training is more than just learning to swing a blade. It's about discipline, control, and focus. It will test not only your body but your heart." Izuku nodded, eager to begin. "I'm ready." Master Hisao handed him a wooden sword, guiding him through the basic stances and movements. As he practiced, Izuku felt something shift inside him. The sword wasn't just a tool, it felt like an extension of his body, a natural way to channel his haki. He could feel the power of his armament haki infusing the blade, turning the wood into something far stronger. As the days passed, Izuku's training intensified. He spent every moment honing his skills with the sword, mastering the balance between his quirk and his body. His observation haki helped him anticipate Master Hisao's movements during sparring, and his armament haki made his sword strikes stronger than ever. Finally, the day arrived. It was the last day of school before summer vacation. Izuku stood at the front of the classroom, his bakken slung over his back. He had trained hard, and though he still had a long way to go, he felt more confident in his abilities than ever before. The classroom buzzed with excitement as the teacher, Mr. Shiro, stood at the front. Mr. Shiro was a no-nonsense teacher, but he had a way of inspiring the students to push beyond their limits. "All right, class," Mr. Shiro began, his voice calm but firm. "You've all made it through another year. But before we finish up, I need to ask you something important." The students fell silent, their attention focused on him. Izuku was so wrapped up in his thoughts that he didn't even hear the words. His mind was a blur as he thought about the future, his dream of becoming a hero, his heart racing with excitement at the prospect of the upcoming UA entrance exams. What if this was his chance? His chance to prove to himself, to his mom, and to everyone that he could be more than just the boy with no quirk. He zoned out completely, not hearing Mr. Shiro's words at all. All he could think about was his dream, the dream he'd had for so long. The sound of the bell ringing was the only thing that broke him from his thoughts. The noise snapped him back to reality, and he suddenly realized that the class was over. The students stood up in a flurry of chatter, packing their things away. Izuku smiled faintly to himself, determination shining in his eyes. He didn't need to hear the rest of the announcement, he knew exactly what he had to do next. He was going to UA, and nothing would stand in his way. The sound of the school bell echoed through the halls, breaking Izuku Midoriya from his thoughts. He blinked, realizing he had completely zoned out during Mr. Shiro's closing remarks to the class. Around him, students were packing up their belongings, chattering excitedly about their plans for the summer, or for the lucky few, their hopes for the prestigious UA high school. Hey, Deku! Bakugo's sharp voice cut through the noise, making Izuku flinch. Turning slowly, Izuku saw Bakugo standing at his desk with his usual sneer. His palms sparked faintly, the explosion small but threatening. You better not think for 1 second you're gonna get into UA with that lame quirk of yours. Izuku clenched his fists, but he didn't respond. He had learned that arguing with Bakugo only made things worse. Instead, he packed up his notebook, slung his bag over his shoulder, and walked past him without a word. Tch. Bakugo clicked his tongue, watching Izuku leave. Better stay out of my way, Deku. You're just gonna embarrass yourself. Ignoring him, Izuku stepped out into the cool afternoon air. His heart was pounding, not from fear of Bakugo, but from anticipation. He couldn't wait to get home, to keep training, and to prepare for the UA entrance exam. The streets were busy with people finishing their workday, and Izuku lost himself in the crowd. He kept his head down, his mind racing with thoughts of his future. How could he refine his Haki before the exam? Master Hisao's sword training had been invaluable, but would it be enough? I'll just have to work harder, he muttered to himself, determination flickering in his eyes. As he walked under an overpass, he felt a sudden, overwhelming sense of danger. His observation Haki flared to life, and time seemed to slow. Izuku turned his head just in time to see a manhole cover burst open behind him, a torrent of viscous sludge pouring out. What the? Izuku barely managed to jump back as the sludge villain emerged, its grotesque form twisting and expanding. Finally, some fresh air. The villain snarled, its eyes locking onto Izuku. And look at this, a perfect little body to hide in. The creature lunged at him. Instinctively, Izuku activated his armament Haki, fortifying his arms as he braced himself. The sludge collided with his defense, splattering but failing to overpower him. You've got some fight in you, kid. The villain growled, reforming and attacking again. Izuku ducked and weaved, his observation Haki allowing him to predict the villain's movements. His fortified fist struck out, hitting the sludge hard enough to knock chunks away, but the villain reformed with ease. I can't win like this, Izuku thought, sweat pouring down his face. I need a plan. The villain surged forward, wrapping around Izuku's legs and pulling him to the ground. His fortified arms kept the sludge from engulfing his torso, but he was losing strength. No, Izuku gritted his teeth, pushing back with everything he had. I won't give up. Just as the villain began to smother him, a booming voice echoed through the alley. Never fear, for I am here. All Might appeared in a blur, landing with enough force to create a small shockwave. The villain growled in recognition. All Might, that's right, All Might declared, grinning. And I'm here to put an end to this. With a single, earth-shaking punch, All Might scattered the sludge villain, splattering it across the alley. Izuku collapsed to the ground, gasping for air. All Might quickly scooped the sludge into an empty soda bottle, sealing it tight. There we go. Another villain neutralized. He turned to Izuku, helping him to his feet. You okay, young man? Izuku nodded, still in awe. Why yeah, thank you, All Might. You're amazing. All Might grinned and struck a heroic pose. Just doing my job. He prepared to leap away, but Izuku's heart raced. This was his chance. Wait, Izuku shouted, grabbing onto All Might's leg just as the hero launched himself into the air. What are you doing? All Might exclaimed, looking down at the boy clinging to him. I need to ask you something. Izuku shouted over the rushing wind. All Might sighed, landing on a rooftop. As he set Izuku down, the bottle containing the sludge villain slipped out of his pocket, rolling unnoticed to the side. Izuku scrambled to his feet, his heart pounding. I need to know, can someone like me, someone without a strong quirk, become a hero? All Might's smile faltered, and he coughed violently, spitting out blood. Izuku froze in shock as the once mighty hero deflated, his muscular form shrinking into that of a frail, skinny man. What happened to you? Izuku stammered. All Might sighed, sitting down. This is my true form. A battle with a particularly nasty villain left me like this. I can only maintain my muscular form for a few hours a day. Izuku stared, his mind reeling. The number one hero, the symbol of peace, had a secret like this. About your question, All Might continued, his tone softer. Being a hero is about more than just power. But, it's tough without a strong quirk. Izuku's chest tightened. He was about to press further when an explosion ripped through the air, shaking the building. All Might's head snapped toward the noise. That's close. Without hesitation, they rushed down the stairs, emerging into chaos. A massive crowd had gathered, and smoke billowed from a street corner. Flames flickered in the distance, and Izuku's heart sank as he saw the cause of the commotion. The sludge villain had escaped and was now attacking Bakugo Katsuki. The villain had engulfed Bakugo, who struggled to break free, his explosions flaring but doing little damage. Bakugo's eyes darted around in panic, his usual confidence nowhere to be seen. 3 heroes stood nearby, but none moved to help. One of them, a man with a water-based quirk, shook his head. My quirk isn't strong enough to deal with that kind of mass. Another hero, a wood manipulator, sighed. If we go in, we might make it worse. The kid's explosions are keeping it unstable. Izuku's heart pounded as he watched. Bakugo's eyes locked with his, and in that moment, Izuku saw something he had never seen before: fear. Without thinking, Izuku's legs moved. Hey, kid, stop. One of the heroes shouted, but Izuku didn't listen. He charged forward, activating his armament Haki. His fists glowed faintly as he struck the sludge villain, splattering parts of it away from Bakugo. Let him go, Izuku shouted, his voice filled with determination. The sludge villain roared, swatting at Izuku. He dodged with his observation Haki, ducking and weaving through the attacks. His strikes grew more precise, aiming for weak points in the villain's form, but it wasn't enough. The sludge began to wrap around him, pulling him closer. Stupid Deku, Bakugo shouted, his voice muffled. What are you doing? I won't let you die. Izuku yelled, struggling against the sludge. Just as the villain tightened its grip, a familiar booming voice rang out. Never fear. All Might appeared in his muscular form, his eyes blazing with determination. For I am here. With a single punch, All Might struck the villain. The force of his blow was so immense that it dispersed the sludge entirely, clearing the skies above and sending a gust of wind rippling through the crowd. The heroes quickly moved to secure the villain while medics rushed to check on Bakugo. As the chaos settled, the heroes turned to Izuku, their faces stern. That was reckless, kid, one of them scolded. You could have gotten yourself and that boy killed. Izuku bowed deeply, his voice steady despite the tears in his eyes. I'm sorry, I couldn't just stand there and do nothing. Bakugo, sitting on the ground with soot on his face, glared at Izuku. I didn't need your help, you damn nerd. Izuku looked at him, his expression calm. Maybe not, but I couldn't leave you behind. As Izuku made his way home, the memory of the fight lingered in his mind. His body ached, but his heart was steady. Before he could reach his apartment, All Might appeared once more, his skinny form leaning against a lamppost. You're quite the courageous one, young man, All Might said, coughing into his hand. I wanted to talk to you about something. Izuku turned, surprised. All Might. The hero took a deep breath. I've been looking for someone to inherit my quirk, one for all. Watching you today, I realized you might be the one I'm looking for. Izuku's eyes widened. Inherit your quirk, you mean, I could have your power? All Might nodded, his expression serious. Yes, I believe you have the heart of a hero. Izuku hesitated, his fists clenching. Thank you, All Might. But, I don't want to rely on someone else's power. I want to become the number one hero with my own strength. All Might stared at him, shocked by the conviction in his voice. Slowly, a smile spread across his face. You truly are something special, young man. And with that resolve, I can confidently say, you can become a hero. Izuku's heart swelled with determination. His path was set, and he would walk it on his own terms. Izuku Midoriya's heart was racing. All Might, the symbol of peace, had just offered him something incredible, his quirk, one for all. And yet, Izuku had declined. I want to become the number one hero, he had said, his voice steady, but I want to do it with my own strength. All Might stared at him for a long moment, his face unreadable. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. "Young man, you've got guts," he said, his voice softer now. "Most people would have jumped at the chance without a second thought. But I see something special in you, and I want to help you succeed on your own terms." Izuku's eyes widened. "You mean?" "Yes," All Might said with a grin. "I'll train you, Midoriya. Your body, your stamina, your instincts, everything. You have a strong will, but your foundation needs work if you want to compete with the best." Izuku felt his heart swell with determination. "Thank you, All Might. I promise I won't let you down." "All right, then," All Might said, clapping his hands together. "But don't think for a second this will be easy. Meet me at the Dagoba beach tomorrow morning. Bring water, and plenty of resolve." The first day of training. The next morning, Izuku stood at the edge of Dagoba beach, his jaw dropping as he took in the sheer amount of trash piled high along the shoreline. Old tires, rusted appliances, and mounds of debris stretched out in every direction. "All of this needs to be cleaned?" Izuku asked, his voice trembling. "Exactly," All Might said, grinning. "Clearing this beach will not only help the community, but it'll also build your strength, endurance, and discipline. Every piece of junk you move is a step closer to your goal." Izuku nodded, though his legs felt weak just looking at the task ahead. "Okay, I'll do it." He approached the nearest pile of debris, crouching to pick up an old tire. As he struggled to lift it, his arms and legs trembled under the weight. A bead of sweat rolled down his face, and his mind wandered to the countless hours he'd spent training his quirk and swordsmanship. "I've trained to master my quirk," Izuku muttered under his breath, gripping the tire harder, "and I've worked endlessly to improve my swordsmanship, but I've never trained my body like this. If I don't change that now, I'll never be able to stand at the top." With a loud grunt, he hoisted the tire over his shoulder and began trudging toward the designated collection area. His legs burned with each step, but he forced himself to push forward. All Might watched him closely, arms crossed, a smile still on his face. "That's the spirit, young man. Keep pushing," All Might called out, voice filled with encouragement. The work was exhausting. Just a single trip left Izuku's arms aching and his legs shaky. "Pace yourself, young Midoriya," All Might called out after him. "The key to endurance is consistency. Push too hard too fast, and you'll burn out." Izuku wiped the sweat from his brow and took a few deep breaths. "You're right," he muttered, nodding to himself. He started walking slower, pacing himself while focusing on each motion. As he moved more deliberately, he felt the burn in his muscles shift into something more manageable. It wasn't easy, but the more he worked, the clearer his goal became. By midday, Izuku was drenched in sweat, his hands blistered from gripping the heavy debris. But each time he felt like stopping, he thought about UA. High school, about his dream, and about how far he still had to go. "I can do this," he muttered to himself, lifting another piece of trash. The sun beat down on him as he continued to clear the beach, but his resolve remained unshaken. He thought back to the countless hours he had spent training his Haki, his swordsmanship, and the time spent honing his quirk. But this was different. This was building the foundation that would support everything else. This was strengthening his very body. As the day wore on, the amount of trash seemed endless, but Izuku's determination never wavered. Every step he took brought him closer to something greater. His muscles screamed in protest, but he ignored the pain. He had to. The thought of standing in front of All Might, showing him his progress, made him push harder. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, Izuku collapsed onto the sand, his body trembling from exhaustion. His chest rose and fell with heavy breaths, and his limbs felt like they were made of lead. Despite his fatigue, there was a sense of pride within him. He had worked harder today than ever before, and though the beach was still far from clean, it was starting to show signs of progress. "Well done, young man," All Might said, handing him a bottle of water. "This is just the beginning, but you've shown great resolve. Keep that fire burning." Izuku smiled weakly. "Thank you, All Might. I'll keep working hard." Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Each morning, Izuku worked tirelessly to clear the beach. The heavy lifting strengthened his muscles, while the repetitive tasks honed his focus and stamina. He became accustomed to the grueling work, building up his physical endurance more and more each day. He also focused on refining his haki. In the mornings, he would clear debris, and in the evenings, he'd meet with Master Hisao to continue his swordsmanship training. The blend of physical conditioning and mental sharpening kept Izuku busy, but he welcomed the challenge. It kept him focused, it kept him determined, and every day, he felt himself getting closer to his goal. One evening, after a particularly intense training session, Izuku sat down, his back against a tree near the dojo. He wiped the sweat from his brow, staring up at the starry sky. His mind drifted to the battles ahead, to the trials he would face as he pursued his dream of becoming the #1 hero. I need to be better, Izuku thought, clenching his fists. I can't rely on just one thing. I need to be strong in every way, physically, mentally, and with my sword. Only then will I be ready. As he trained, he learned more about himself. He learned that strength wasn't just about power, it was about balance. His body, his haki, his swordsmanship, they all needed to work together, each part supporting the other. The more he trained, the more everything began to click. One night, after a sparring match with Hisao, Izuku felt his blade slice through the air with newfound precision. His strikes were sharper, more controlled, and the pressure of the sword felt almost natural in his hands. Hisao nodded, impressed. Your progress is undeniable, Izuku. You've sharpened your skills, but now you must learn to trust them. Trust in your haki, trust in your body, and trust in your instincts. The battlefield will test you, and in that moment, you must rely on everything you've learned. The day before the UA entrance exam. The night before the UA entrance exam, Izuku stood on the now spotless Dagoba Municipal Beach, staring out at the ocean. The waves crashed gently against the shore, a calming backdrop to the whirlwind of emotions swirling in his chest. You've done it, young Midoriya, All Might said, walking up beside him. This beach is proof of your hard work and determination. But more than that, you've built the strength, skill, and resolve needed to face the challenges ahead. Izuku turned to him, his eyes shining with gratitude. Thank you, All Might. I couldn't have done this without your guidance. All Might laughed. Nonsense. I may have given you the tools, but it was you who chose to wield them. Remember that tomorrow. You've earned your place at UA, go out there and show them what you're made of. Later that evening, Izuku visited Master Hisao for one final sparring session. You've come far, Hisao said as their blades clashed, sparks flying in the dimly lit dojo. Your haki has matured, and your strikes are precise. Tomorrow, trust in what you've learned. I will, Izuku said, his voice steady. Thank you for everything, Master Hisao. Hisao nodded, a rare smile crossing his face. Good luck, Izuku. The path of a hero is never easy, but you have the strength to walk it. Morning of the entrance exam. As the sun rose on the day of the UA entrance exam, Izuku stood outside the towering gates of the prestigious school. His heart pounded in his chest, but this time, it wasn't fear, it was excitement. He glanced down at his hands, calloused from months of training, and then at the hilt of his sword, strapped securely to his side. The sweat on his brow wasn't from nerves, but from anticipation. His body had been honed by All Might's grueling training, his swordsmanship refined by Master Hisao's careful guidance, and his haki had sharpened into a potent weapon. All Might's training, Master Hisao's lessons, everything I've worked for has led to this moment, he thought, taking a deep breath. With renewed determination, Izuku stepped forward, ready to face the challenges ahead. This is it, he whispered to himself. Time to show them that I can become a hero. Izuku Midoriya stood in the massive UA high school auditorium, his heart racing with anticipation. The space around him buzzed with excitement and tension, the other students chattering nervously as they awaited the entrance exam. Izuku's palms were slightly sweaty, his fingers tightly gripping the hilt of his sword. He had worked so hard for this moment, but now, standing before the gates of UA, it was finally sinking in that this was the true test of everything he had trained for. He had trained tirelessly, refining his swordsmanship, honing his haki abilities, and building his body to match his growing resolve. But nothing could prepare him for the sheer magnitude of this moment. He was about to face a real test of his abilities, surrounded by other hopeful students, all striving to become heroes. All right, everyone, sit tight. We're about to begin. The booming voice of Present Mike filled the room, immediately commanding attention. The students quieted down, and Izuku turned his focus to the front of the room. Good to see you all. Welcome to the UA entrance exam. Present Mike continued, his energy practically bouncing off the walls. I'm your proctor for today, and I'm here to tell you exactly how this exam is gonna work. It's a practical exam, where we'll test your combat skills, your strategy, and your ability to survive in a disaster zone. Izuku felt a knot tighten in his stomach, but he kept his focus, knowing he had trained for this. Present Mike paced excitedly back and forth, his voice loud and clear. Now, there are 3 types of robots you'll face in the test: small, medium, and large. You'll gain points by defeating them or immobilizing them, and you need to score as many points as possible to pass. But there's a catch. There's a 0-point robot, a big, tough, and dangerous machine that doesn't give any points, and it's just there to test your survival instincts. Stay away from it. Izuku's eyes widened at the mention of the 0-point robot. It sounded terrifying. The mention of a massive, overwhelming threat like that raised the stakes for everyone. One of the students in the front row, a serious-looking boy with glasses, immediately raised his hand. Present Mike, about the 0-point robot, why would you even include such a dangerous obstacle in the exam? Wouldn't that make it unfair? Izuku turned his attention to the student, wondering what Present Mike's response would be. But before the hero could answer, a voice cut through the tension. Don't be an idiot, the voice said harshly. Izuku blinked and looked toward the source of the voice. Bakugo Katsuki, a brash-looking student in the front row, who was scowling with an intensity that was hard to ignore. The 0-point robot is a threat, but it's not something you should worry about unless you're stupid enough to engage it. It's just there to test if we have the brains to avoid it. The student with glasses, clearly flustered, opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, another voice called out. Please, if you'd just let Present Mike finish explaining. The voice was sharp, filled with authority, and it belonged to another student who quickly stood up from his seat. It was a tall, well-built young man with a serious expression, his dark blue suit fitting him snugly. His posture was rigid, almost like a soldier. I don't believe anyone should be questioning the exam, especially before we even hear all the details, the student continued. It's just common sense. Present Mike is giving us the necessary information, so let's allow him to finish without interruptions. Izuku watched the student for a moment. His words sounded confident, but there was an edge to his tone that made him seem a bit too intense. It wasn't long before Present Mike responded with a hearty laugh. Ha, all right, everyone calm down. Just letting you know, that's Iida Tenya for you, our resident rule follower. Present Mike said, gesturing to the student. But you're right, Iida, let me finish my explanation before we have a full-blown debate. Iida, as he was apparently named, lowered himself back into his seat, although his stern gaze remained on the room. Thank you, Iida, Present Mike said with a grin. Now, as I was saying, the 0-point robot isn't something you should try to fight. But it's not all about points either. You'll need to make the right choices in order to pass the exam. If you focus too much on the big guys, you might not rack up enough points with the smaller ones. It's all about strategy. The students exchanged nervous glances, but Present Mike wasn't done yet. Now, under your seats, you'll find your zone assignment. Pull it out and check. It'll tell you where you'll be starting your exam. Go on, check them out. Izuku quickly reached under his seat and pulled out a card. The words, Zone B3, were written on it. He looked around and saw other students reading their assignments as well. The atmosphere in the room shifted to one of anticipation as everyone realized that the real test was just moments away. Present Mike clapped his hands together. All right, you all know your zones now. Time to head out and get ready. We're gonna start the exam in 5 minutes. Get moving, and remember, don't just go charging in blindly. Use your heads. The students began to shuffle out of their seats, heading toward the designated zones. Izuku stood up, his heart pounding, and followed the flow of students out of the auditorium and into the testing area. The city zone. Izuku soon found himself standing in the middle of a ruined cityscape. The air smelled faintly of smoke, and debris littered the ground. It looked like a disaster zone, a perfect place to test aspiring heroes. His eyes scanned the area, alert and ready. The familiar weight of his sword against his side was a comfort, and his haki buzzed through his body, keeping him sharp and aware. As he ventured deeper into the city zone, he noticed a girl standing near a fallen pillar, looking a little nervous. She had brown hair tied into pigtails, and she was scanning her surroundings with wide eyes. Izuku approached her slowly, his voice calm. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked gently. The girl turned to him, startled, before offering a nervous smile. "Oh, hi, yeah, I'm just a little overwhelmed," she admitted, her voice shaky. "This is a lot to take in, you know. Also my name is Ochako Uraraka." Izuku gave her a friendly smile. "I understand, it's a big moment for all of us. But I'm sure you'll do great. You've got this." Before she could respond, a voice from behind them suddenly interrupted. "Hey, excuse me sir." Izuku's head snapped around to see a tall, blue-suited boy walking toward them. He looked somewhat upset, his posture rigid as if he were ready to lecture. "Why are you talking to her?" The boy demanded an answer, his gaze fixing on Izuku. "You should be focused on the exam, not chatting with others. Don't you realize this is a test of survival?" Izuku blinked in confusion. Sorry, I didn't mean to distract her. I was just..." The boy interrupted him again. "You shouldn't be talking to people unless it's absolutely necessary. Focus on the task at hand." He looked at the girl, Ochako, and scowled. "And you, don't let him distract you. This is serious." Ochako looked back and forth between the two boys, her nerves rising. Izuku, taken aback by the sudden harshness, tried to smooth things over. "It's okay. We're all in this together. I'm sure she can focus just fine." He turned back to the boy. "I'm Izuku Midoriya, and the girl's name is Ochako Uraraka by the way. I'm not trying to be a distraction." The boy's stern expression softened slightly. "Tenya Iida," he replied curtly. "Just make sure you're focused, Midoriya. This exam is too important for you to waste time." Before Izuku could respond, a loud siren blared, signaling the start of the exam. "All right, enough talking." Present Mike's voice echoed over the loudspeakers. "The exam starts now. Get moving, students. Show us what you've got." Izuku didn't waste time. His keen senses quickly alerted him to the presence of a one-point model robot hiding behind a pile of rubble. Its metallic body creaked as it shifted, unaware of the incoming danger. Izuku's sword was already drawn, and in a blur of motion, he surged forward. With a swift swing, his blade, coated with armament Haki, cut through the robot's torso, causing sparks to fly as the machine collapsed into a pile of twisted metal. The robot crumpled, and Izuku immediately checked his score. 1 point. He moved on without hesitation, his mind focused. The next robot was a 2-point model, a more aggressive design with bladed arms and sharp movement. Izuku could hear the robot's heavy footsteps as it neared from the street corner, its mechanical eyes scanning for prey. Izuku's observation Haki flared, and he immediately read its movements. The robot lunged, its bladed arms swinging toward him in a vicious arc. With a burst of speed, Izuku dodged the strike, his body moving as if guided by instinct. He countered with a quick slash to its midsection, the sword cutting clean through its armor. Sparks erupted as the robot fell, its body twitching before it finally powered down. 2 more points. Progressing through the exam, Izuku was moving fast now, each robot falling with minimal effort as he utilized his armament Haki to enhance his strength. The city zone was starting to clear out a bit, but there was no shortage of robots. He quickly encountered a 3-point model, a massive, hulking machine with multiple blaster cannons on its back. The robot fired off a barrage of lasers, but Izuku was ready. With observation Haki guiding his movements, he easily dodged each blast, his agility amplified by his sharpened senses. The robot's movements were predictable, almost mechanical in their simplicity. Izuku circled around the back of the robot, aiming for its weak points, its exhaust vents and power core. With a single powerful strike of his sword, empowered by armament Haki, he struck the core, causing the robot to stagger. Another blow shattered its blasters, and with a final thrust of his sword, the 3-point robot fell. 3 more points. By the time he had fought his way through several more robots, Izuku was feeling confident. He had accumulated 50 points. Each battle felt like a confirmation of his abilities, his swordsmanship, his haki, and his body, all working in sync. Izuku had been making his way through the city zone, accumulating points with each robot he fought. His movements were fast, his strikes precise, and his senses sharp, all thanks to his months of grueling training. But as he rounded a corner, everything changed. A loud rumbling filled the air, and the ground beneath his feet began to shake. The sound of massive, thundering footsteps echoed throughout the city. Izuku's blood ran cold as he instinctively activated his observation haki, his senses reaching out to gauge the presence of whatever was causing the chaos. Then he saw it. The 0-point robot, a colossal machine of destruction, stomped into view, its towering form blocking out the sun. Each step caused the ground to tremble as the robot moved toward the center of the city, its massive arms swinging with brutal force. The 0-point robot wasn't designed for speed or precision. It was a juggernaut meant to wreak havoc, and it was coming dangerously close to the rubble where someone was trapped. Izuku's eyes widened in horror as he spotted a figure beneath the debris, a student, struggling to free herself. He recognized her immediately, Ochako Uraraka. She was stuck, pinned by a large piece of debris, and with each massive step the 0-point robot took, the ground shook violently, making it even harder for her to escape. Izuku's instincts kicked in. He couldn't let this happen. His body surged with adrenaline as he sprinted toward the rubble, heart pounding in his chest. The 0-point robot's foot came crashing down onto the debris with terrifying force, just inches from Ochako's head. "No!" Izuku shouted, his voice a mix of fear and determination. In that instant, Izuku pushed his armament haki to its limit, his entire body brimming with power. He could feel the intense pressure of the robot's next attack as it raised its foot to strike down at Ochako, but he wasn't going to let that happen. With everything he had, Izuku sprinted forward, closing the distance between himself and the massive machine. His heart thudded in his chest as he summoned his strength. His observation haki guided him, his senses honing in on the perfect moment. The 0-point robot's foot was raised high, ready to crush Ochako beneath its massive foot. "Crimson Demon Strike," Izuku shouted, his voice sharp and full of resolve. He swung his sword with all the power he could muster, channeling his armament haki into the blade. The strike was precise, his sword cutting through the air like lightning. With a resounding crack, Izuku's blade cleaved through the massive foot of the robot. Sparks flew, and the severed arm fell to the ground with a thunderous crash, its mechanical joints grinding to a halt as the 0-point robot began to fall forward as it had been thrown off balance. Izuku barely registered the exhaustion in his limbs as he grabbed Ochako, pulling her from the rubble and yanking her out of harm's way. She gasped for air, looking up at him with wide eyes, clearly shaken by the near-death experience. "Thank you," she whispered, still dazed. Izuku didn't waste a second. He could hear the 0-point robot roaring in anger. Its remaining leg was trying to help him get back up, but there was nothing more he could do. The robot was too large, and he had already done what he could. He quickly dragged Ochako farther from the path of the looming danger. As he reached safety, the booming voice of Present Mike echoed through the city. "All right, that's it. The practical exam has ended. All students are to cease combat and return to the starting area immediately." Izuku's heart was still racing, his body trembling from the strain. His sword, still glowing with the remnants of his armament haki, hung heavily at his side. He looked around, seeing the other students either retreating or finishing off their last few robots. Some were already celebrating their successes, while others were stunned by the intensity of the test. He breathed a sigh of relief, feeling the adrenaline slowly ebbing away as he realized that the test was finally over. Ochako looked at him, still in awe. You really saved me." Izuku's cheeks flushed with embarrassment, but he smiled at her. "It was nothing. I couldn't just let you get hurt." As the crowd of students began to gather in the center of the city, Present Mike's voice rang out once again. "Great work, everyone. Now, head back to the stadium and get ready for the results. UA will be announcing your scores soon." Izuku glanced back one last time at the 0-point robot, its massive frame now frozen in place. The foot he had severed lay in a twisted heap, and the machine was beginning to power down. It was a dangerous beast, but Izuku had managed to stop it long enough to save someone's life. He had passed the test. not just by defeating robots, but by showing what it meant to be a hero. He hadn't just relied on his quirk or his swordsmanship, he had acted when it counted, putting himself at risk to protect someone else. As he walked back toward the starting area, he felt something deep inside him shift. This was just the beginning. The entrance exam was over, but his journey was just beginning. Izuku Midoriya sat in his room, his legs crossed on his bed, staring intently at the ceiling. The events of the UA entrance exam replayed in his mind like a film reel. His sword, now resting on its stand against the wall, gleamed faintly in the sunlight streaming through the window. His body still ached slightly from the intensity of the test, but it was a good ache, a reminder of his hard work. He had done everything he could during the exam. He had fought robot after robot, used his Haki to its fullest, and saved Ochako from the 0-point robot. But now, the waiting game had begun. Days had passed since the exam, and the uncertainty was eating at him. What if I didn't score enough? Izuku muttered to himself, gripping the bedsheet tightly. What if saving Ochako cost me the points I needed? A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Izuku, there's a letter for you, his mother, Inko Midoriya, called from the hallway. Izuku's heart leapt into his throat. He scrambled off the bed, nearly tripping over himself as he rushed to the door. His mother stood there, holding a large envelope with the UA logo stamped across the front. "It's from UA," she said, her voice filled with a mix of excitement and nervousness. Izuku took the envelope with trembling hands, staring at it as though it might disappear if he blinked. Thank you, Mom," he stammered, stepping back into his room. Inko gave him a reassuring smile. "No matter what happens, I'm proud of you." Izuku nodded, shutting the door behind him. He sat at his desk, staring at the envelope for a long moment before finally tearing it open. A small disc slipped out, clattering onto the wooden surface. He picked it up and placed it in his computer's projection port. A moment later, the holographic figure of All Might appeared, his larger-than-life grin filling the room. "Congratulations, young Midoriya," All Might's voice boomed, causing Izuku to jump slightly in his chair. "All Might," Izuku gasped, his eyes wide. "That's right, I'm here to deliver the good news personally. You passed the UA entrance exam." Izuku's heart felt like it might burst. He clutched his chest, his breath catching in his throat as All Might continued. "Now, let's break down your performance," All Might said, gesturing to a chart that appeared beside him. "You scored an impressive 57 points in the combat section. That's no small feat, young man. But what really set you apart was your heroic spirit." The chart shifted, showing a replay of Izuku cutting through the 0-point robot's arm to save Ochako. "You earned 60 rescue points for your actions during the exam, bringing your total to 117 points. All Might said proudly, "Your selflessness and courage exemplify what it means to be a hero. Welcome to UA High School, young Midoriya." The hologram ended, leaving Izuku staring at the now blank screen. He was in. He had made it. A new beginning. The next morning, Izuku stood before the towering gates of UA High School, his acceptance letter safely tucked into his bag. The campus was even more impressive up close, the sheer size and grandeur of the buildings filling him with awe. "Wow," he murmured, stepping through the gates. Students bustled around him, all wearing the same expression of excitement and nervousness. He recognized a few faces from the exam, including Ochako, who waved enthusiastically when she spotted him. "Midoriya, over here," she called, jogging over to him. "Uraraka," Izuku said, smiling shyly. "I was hoping I'd see you here," she said cheerfully. "Thanks again for saving me during the exam. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for you." Izuku rubbed the back of his neck. "I just did what anyone would do." "No way," Ochako said firmly. "Not everyone would have faced that 0-point robot like you did." "That was amazing." Before Izuku could respond, a familiar voice cut through the conversation. "You two again." They turned to see Tenya Iida approaching, his stride purposeful and his expression serious. "I'm surprised to see you here, Midoriya," Iida said, adjusting his glasses. "But I must commend you. Your actions during the exam were truly commendable." Thanks, Iida," Izuku said, taken aback by the unexpected compliment. "I misjudged you," Iida admitted. You're clearly someone who acts with purpose and resolve. I look forward to seeing what you can do. Izuku smiled, feeling a bit more confident. Thanks. I'm looking forward to learning with all of you. Near the back of the room sat a tall girl with black hair tied into a high ponytail, her posture regal and confident. She seemed to exude intelligence and poise, flipping through a thick notebook as though reviewing some sort of plan. Izuku hesitated before walking over, his innate curiosity urging him forward. Hi, he said nervously, clutching his bag. Is it okay if I sit here? The girl glanced up, her dark eyes studying him for a moment before she smiled politely. Of course. My name is Momo Yaoyorozu. It's nice to meet you. Izuku Midoriya, he stammered, quickly taking the seat next to her. You're the one who destroyed the 0-point robot during the entrance exam, aren't you? Momo asked, her tone genuinely curious. Why yeah, Izuku admitted, rubbing the back of his neck. But it wasn't really anything special. I just couldn't let someone get hurt. That kind of thinking is exactly what makes a good hero, Momo said with a small nod. It's clear you have a strong sense of responsibility. Izuku blinked, surprised by the compliment. Gee, thank you. That means a lot coming from someone like you. Someone like me, she asked, raising an eyebrow. You just seem really, smart, he said quickly, his cheeks turning pink. Momo chuckled softly. Thank you. I hope we can work well together this year. As more students filed into the room, Izuku began discreetly surveying his classmates, his notebook already in hand. At one table, a girl with pink skin and yellow eyes was chatting animatedly with a tall boy who had multiple arms. The girl's energy was infectious, and Izuku quickly scribbled down notes. Pink skin, highly energetic. Possible quirk related to mobility or elasticity. Another boy with red spiky hair and sharp teeth stood by the window, laughing with a short boy whose head resembled a literal grape. Red-haired boy. Sturdy-looking physique, likely physical strength quirk. Grape-headed boy. Quirk likely related to adhesive properties. As Izuku continued jotting notes, his eyes landed on a boy sitting at the back with his feet propped up on the desk. Katsuki Bakugo. Get your feet off the desk. The booming voice of Tenya Iida shattered the hum of conversation in the room. He marched over to Bakugo, his expression stern and authoritative. This is a place of learning, Iida said, pointing at Bakugo. You're disrespecting the school and the people who worked hard to get here. Bakugo lazily opened one eye, his lips curling into a smirk. And who made you class president, huh? Go bother someone else, 4 eyes. Iida's eyes widened, and he stiffened at the insult. This kind of behavior is unacceptable. You'll regret such an attitude when the teachers see you. Yeah, Bakugo muttered, waving him off. Izuku, still sitting with Momo, winced. He knew this wasn't going to end well. A familiar face. Before Iida could retort, Bakugo's sharp gaze locked onto Izuku. His smirk deepened, turning into something far more menacing. Well, Bakugo drawled, standing up and ignoring Iida completely. If it isn't Deku. Izuku's stomach twisted in knots as Bakugo sauntered over, hands shoved into his pockets. Surprised you made it this far, Bakugo sneered, leaning in close. But don't get comfortable, you're still the same loser I've always known. Izuku swallowed hard, his fingers tightening around his notebook. I'm not the same person anymore, Kachan. Bakugo's eyes narrowed, a dangerous gleam in them. We'll see how long that lasts. Before things could escalate further, Momo stood up, her voice calm but firm. This kind of behavior is unnecessary, she said, her gaze steady as she looked at Bakugo. We're all here to become heroes. You should focus on your own progress instead of trying to intimidate others. Bakugo's smirk faltered slightly, but he quickly covered it with a scoff. Whatever. He turned and stomped back to his seat, leaving Izuku feeling a mix of gratitude and tension. Thank you, Izuku whispered to Momo. She nodded, sitting down again. Don't let people like him distract you. You're here because you earned it. Izuku nodded, her words giving him a small boost of confidence. Suddenly, the door slid open with a loud thud. A strange figure in a yellow sleeping bag slithered into the room and collapsed at the front. Is that our teacher? The pink-skinned girl near the front whispered to the boy with lightning bolt-shaped hair. No way. This has gotta be a joke, the spiky-haired boy with a tail, muttered. But the figure sat up, unzipping the bag to reveal a scruffy man with tired eyes and unkempt hair. It took you all 8 seconds to quiet down, the man said flatly, his voice as lifeless as his appearance. Pathetic. The room was dead silent. I'm Shota Aizawa, I'm your homeroom teacher, he continued, standing up and scanning the room lazily. We don't have time for orientation icebreakers. Change into these. He tossed a pile of gym uniforms onto the desk nearest him. Wait, no introductions or anything? A brown-haired girl near the middle asked, raising her hand hesitantly. Aizawa sighed, rubbing his temples like he was already regretting his decision to teach. Fine, quick introductions. Name and quirk. Then suit up and meet me on the field. Hi, I'm Mina Ashido, the pink-skinned girl said, standing with a grin. She summoned a bubbly, pink liquid from her hands. My quirk is acid. I can control how strong or gooey it is. I am Tenya Iida, the boy with glasses declared as he stood rigidly, his voice as sharp as his posture. My quirk is engine. I have engines in my legs that let me move at incredible speed. When it was Izuku's turn, he swallowed hard, feeling every pair of eyes on him. He stood up slowly. I'm Izuku Midoriya. My quirk is called Haki. It enhances my senses, strength, and willpower. I can also sense people's movements and strengthen my attacks. There were murmurs of interest, but it was Katsuki Bakugo who scoffed loudest. PFF. Sounds complicated. Got anything flashy, or are you just gonna predict when we yawn, Deku? Izuku blushed but didn't respond. Katsuki Bakugo, the spiky-haired boy, barked when it was his turn. He stood lazily, his hands shoved in his pockets. I make things blow up. Well, that's direct, someone muttered. The next student stood, his two-toned hair catching everyone's attention. I'm Shoto Todoroki. My quirk is half cold, half hot. I can control fire and ice on either side of my body. Each student's introduction only heightened the tension in the room. It was clear that these weren't ordinary kids, they were future heroes, each with incredible potential. As the students filed out of the classroom to pick up their gym uniforms, Izuku found himself walking next to Momo Yaoyorozu. She carried herself with an air of quiet confidence, but Izuku couldn't help but feel a little intimidated. Momo-san, he started hesitantly, glancing over at her. She turned her head slightly, acknowledging him. Yes, I thought your introduction was really impressive, he said, rubbing the back of his neck nervously. Creation seems like such a versatile quirk. I bet you can do so many amazing things with it. Momo smiled softly. Thank you. It does have its advantages, but it requires a lot of studying. I have to memorize the molecular structure of everything I create. Wow, Izuku said, his eyes widening. That's amazing. You must study a lot, huh? She chuckled lightly. I suppose you could say that. But your quirk, Haki, is fascinating. The ability to sense people's movements and enhance yourself. It sounds like a quirk that requires strong mental discipline. Izuku nodded, a little surprised by her observation. Why yeah, it does. It's all about focus. If I lose control, it doesn't work as well. Interesting, Momo mused. You seem to have a good understanding of your abilities. Thanks, Izuku said, blushing slightly. He glanced down at the ground as they continued walking. It's, nice talking to you, Momo-san. She gave him another small smile. Likewise, Midoriya-san. The boys' locker room. Inside the boys' locker room, the atmosphere was light and full of banter. Katsuki Bakugo had already claimed a corner by himself, shooting dirty looks at anyone who came too close. Denki Kaminari grinned as he tossed his gym uniform onto the bench. Man, did you see that Shoto guy? Fire and ice. That's so unfair. Yeah, but you've got electricity, Eijiro Kirishima pointed out. That's awesome too. I just hope I don't fry my own brain during the test, Kaminari said with a laugh. Izuku was quietly changing, trying not to draw attention to himself, when Iida approached him. Midoriya, correct? Iida asked, adjusting his glasses. Why yeah, Izuku replied nervously. You mentioned that your quirk enhances your senses. That's remarkable. Do you have any techniques or strategies in mind for today's test? Izuku blinked. Oh, I haven't thought that far ahead yet. I guess I'll just try to do my best. An admirable attitude, Iida declared, nodding approvingly. We should all strive to push our limits today. From his corner, Bakugo snorted. You're all overthinking it. Just crush everything. That's how you win. The boys exchanged glances but didn't respond. The girls' locker room. Meanwhile, the girls' locker room was buzzing with chatter. Mina Ishido sat on a bench, tying her gym shoes, while Ochako Uraraka leaned against a locker, smiling. Hey, did you see how Midoriya was talking to Momo earlier? Mina said with a mischievous grin. What about it? Ochako asked, tilting her head curiously. I'm just saying, Mina said, smirking. He looked super nervous. You think he's got a crush? Kyoka Jiro chuckled from her spot near the wall. Or maybe he's just shy. He seems like the type. Momo, who was calmly tying her hair into a ponytail, glanced up. He's just polite. There's nothing more to it. Oh, come on, Momo, Mina teased, leaning closer. Do you like him? You were smiling a lot when you were talking to him. Momo's cheeks turned faintly pink, but she maintained her composure. He's nice and interesting to talk to. But I don't think that's relevant right now. Ah, you're blushing. Mina laughed, earning a quiet giggle from Ochako. Let's focus on the test, shall we? Momo said firmly, standing up and turning to face the group. But the slight flush on her face didn't go unnoticed. The girls exchanged knowing looks, stifling more laughter as they continued getting ready. The class gathered on the school's training field, each student wearing the blue UA gym uniforms with the signature, U, design. Aizawa stood before them, looking as disinterested as ever. All right, Aizawa began, holding a tablet. You'll be doing a quirk apprehension test. This will help me figure out what you're capable of and where you stand. Wait, what about orientation? Ochako asked, raising her hand. We don't have time for that, Aizawa replied flatly. The pro-hero world doesn't run on a schedule that suits your comfort. If you want to be a hero, you'd better be ready to adapt. The students exchanged uncertain looks as Aizawa smirked slightly. Oh, and one more thing, he said. Whoever comes in last will be expelled. The class gasped in unison. Expelled, Izuku blurted out. Aizawa's eyes narrowed, the hint of a smirk still playing on his lips. Welcome to UA. The tension was palpable as Class 1A stood on the training field. The morning sun beat down relentlessly, casting long shadows over the blue UA gym uniforms they all wore. Izuku's heart thumped loudly in his chest, his fingers nervously clenching the hem of his shirt. He could feel the pressure in the air, an invisible weight that made it harder to breathe. Aizawa's announcement about the potential expulsion had cast a dark cloud over them, one that seemed to follow each student as they stood in anxious silence. Whoever comes in last is expelled. The words hung in the air, suffocating, as if the very air around them had thickened. Every student's gaze shifted nervously between each other, and the stakes of the day became incredibly clear. Izuku glanced around, trying to gauge the reactions of his classmates. Some, like Bakugo, seemed unaffected by the threat of failure, exuding an air of disinterest, while others, like Ochako, looked genuinely worried. Is he serious? Ochako whispered to Izuku, her voice trembling with the same anxiety Izuku could feel in his own chest. Yeah, but we don't have a choice, Izuku muttered back, trying to steady his breathing, his hands twitching with nerves. He couldn't afford to get distracted. There was no room for error today. The pressure was suffocating, and Izuku could feel it creeping into his bones. I can't fail here, not after all this, he thought, his pulse racing. Aizawa, as cold and detached as always, held up a small device, his eyes scanning the group with indifference. Let's see what you've got. First up, the 50-meter dash. His voice was flat, but there was an underlying sharpness to it that made Izuku's heart beat even faster. He pointed to the marked track nearby, where the white lines seemed to shimmer in the sunlight. Midoriya, Aizawa called, his gaze locking onto Izuku with the usual unblinking intensity. Let's see how fast you are. Izuku's stomach flipped. He swallowed hard, his mouth suddenly dry, his heart thudding against his ribcage like a drumbeat. His legs felt heavy, weighed down by the anxiety creeping up his spine. This is it. I have to prove myself, he told himself. He had no idea how he was supposed to keep up with Iida or Bakugo, two of the fastest in the class, but he had no choice but to give it everything he had. With a final deep breath, Izuku forced himself forward to the starting line. Beside him, Tenya Iida stood tall, his engines already starting to hum with energy, ready to propel him forward. He gave Izuku an encouraging smile, his earnestness as unwavering as ever. "This will be a good test," Iida said confidently, his voice always full of that quiet determination. "Let's see your speed, Midoriya." Izuku nodded, though his insides were a tangled mess of nerves. He bent his knees, and as his body began to settle into position, he activated his observation Haki. Instantly, the world around him seemed to sharpen. Every minute detail, from the sway of Iida's hair to the tiny shifting of his muscles, was crystal clear to Izuku's heightened senses. Time itself felt like it slowed down, and for a moment, he was able to push his anxiety aside. "On your marks," Aizawa's voice was almost inaudible now, like it came from far away. "Get set. Go." And then, like a shot from a cannon, Iida was off. His engines roared to life, and within the blink of an eye, he was a blur of motion, tearing down the track at an unbelievable speed. Izuku surged forward, his legs pumping as he channeled his armament Haki into them, using it to propel himself faster than he thought possible. The world blurred around him as he focused entirely on his form, on pushing through the fatigue that was already setting in. "I can't keep up with him," Izuku realized as Iida's figure pulled farther ahead, but a determination rose in him, and he pushed himself harder. "I just need to give it everything I've got." His legs burned with every step, but he was determined. The finish line seemed to stretch out ahead of him like an endless horizon. With every step, his muscles screamed for relief, but he ignored them, focusing only on reaching that line. He could feel the weight of his classmates' gazes, Bakugo's disdainful glare, Todoroki's quiet scrutiny, Momo's supportive gaze. Their eyes were on him, and he refused to let them down. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Izuku crossed the finish line, his breath coming in ragged gasps. His chest heaved, and for a moment, he felt like collapsing. But then, Aizawa's voice cut through the haze of exhaustion. 6.9 seconds. Izuku blinked, his mind struggling to process the result. It wasn't Iida's impressive 3.04 seconds, but it was better than he had expected. Much better. He stumbled back to the sidelines, trying to steady his breathing. "Not bad for someone without a speed-oriented quirk," Momo said, her voice warm and encouraging. She jotted something down in her notebook, her calm demeanor unchanged by the test. She always seemed so composed, but her words brought Izuku a measure of comfort. Iida approached, offering a smile. "Good work, Midoriya. You've clearly been training." Thanks," Izuku stammered, still trying to catch his breath. The rest of the class took their turns, and Izuku observed them carefully, studying their different approaches. Denki Kaminari's run was solid, though his speed was slightly hampered by his usual lack of focus, as he nearly tripped over his own feet. Mina Ishido, on the other hand, used her acid quirk in an impressive display, sliding effortlessly along the track, her agility drawing surprised murmurs from the others. Izuku couldn't help but admire Mina's ingenuity. She used her quirk creatively to compensate for her lack of speed. "I should take notes for later." Todoroki, of course, stole the show. A burst of ice shot from his feet, propelling him forward in a flurry of snow and ice. The result was nothing short of spectacular. He completed the dash in a staggering 3.2 seconds, his control over his power flawless. Bakugo, as always, was not far behind. With his usual scornful smirk, he launched himself forward, explosions firing from his palms as he tore through the air. He finished in 4.1 seconds, his usual arrogance not dimmed in the slightest. "Too easy," he sneered, glaring at the rest of the class as if daring them to try and surpass him. Izuku clenched his fists but remained silent, determined not to rise to Bakugo's provocations. He had to keep his focus on himself. Bakugo's taunts would only throw him off. The next challenge was a grip strength test, one that had Izuku feeling even more anxious. Shoji Mezzo went first, his multiple arms flexing as he gripped the device. The result, a jaw-dropping 540 kilograms. The entire class stared in awe, impressed by his raw strength. Bakugo went next, his hand crackling with sparks as he gripped the device. 87 kilograms, Aizawa announced, his tone flat and uninterested. That's it, Kaminari teased, unable to help himself, but he was met with a sharp, fiery glare from Bakugo. How about I show you what these hands can really do? Bakugo growled, his temper flaring as sparks flew from his palms. Kaminari quickly backed off, chuckling nervously as the tension in the air increased. Izuku's turn came up, and he hesitated for a moment, his palms damp with sweat. Focus. Use your Haki, he reminded himself. Channeling his armament Haki into his hand, he gripped the device with all the force he could muster. The machine beeped rapidly as it measured his strength, and the result appeared, 65 kilograms. Izuku exhaled in relief. It wasn't an exceptional result, but it wasn't bad either. Not bad, Midoriya, Aizawa commented, his voice neutral but not dismissive. 65. That's amazing. Ochako cheered from the sidelines, her face lighting up with excitement. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and Izuku couldn't help but smile despite himself. He glanced at Momo, who gave him a small, approving nod, and that made him feel even better. I'm not where I want to be, but I'm improving, Izuku thought. The next event was the long-distance softball throw. Aizawa handed each student a ball, instructing them to use their quirks to achieve the maximum distance. Uraraka, you're up, Aizawa called. Ochako's smile was wide and full of energy as she stepped forward, holding the ball in both hands. She activated her zero-gravity quirk, causing the ball to float effortlessly in the air. With a flick of her wrist, she sent it soaring. Infinity, Aizawa said, holding up his tablet, his tone not at all surprised. The class erupted into laughter and applause at Ochako's astounding performance. Midoriya, you're next, Aizawa called. Izuku took a deep breath and approached the line, gripping the softball with trembling hands. His nerves were still high, but he pushed them aside, focusing instead on the task at hand. He activated both observation and armament Haki, pushing his focus to the absolute limit. His eyes zeroed in on the target, and he poured everything he had into the throw. The ball soared through the air, cutting through the wind like a missile, its trajectory flawless. The class watched in silence, their eyes following the flight path. 247 meters, Aizawa announced, nodding slightly in approval. Izuku blinked in disbelief. I did it. I actually improved. He had surpassed his previous attempts by a wide margin. Not bad, Deku, Bakugo muttered grudgingly, though his usual scorn was nowhere to be found. His expression was more neutral now, perhaps even slightly impressed. You're improving, Todoroki added, his voice calm but not unkind. Izuku nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. His chest swelled with pride. Despite the overwhelming tension of the day, he was doing better than he had dared hope. The final test was an endurance run. By now, most of the class was visibly fatigued. Their earlier enthusiasm had been dampened by exhaustion. Everyone had given it their all, and now their bodies were screaming for rest. Izuku's legs burned with every step, but he refused to stop. Beside him, Iida maintained his steady pace, his engines humming softly, his breath steady despite the relentless pace. Behind them, Bakugo and Todoroki were locked in a fierce rivalry, each determined to outrun the other. The air around them crackled with competitive energy as sparks and frost trailed behind them like a visual representation of their rivalry. Izuku gritted his teeth, muttering to himself as he pushed through the pain. Come on, legs, keep moving. His breath came in ragged gasps, but he refused to slow down. He thought of his mom, of All Might's faith in him, of everything he had worked for. I can't give up, not here. Each lap felt like an eternity. His vision blurred with fatigue, but Izuku forced himself to focus on his breathing, pushing through the pain and exhaustion. Finally, the whistle blew, signaling the end. Izuku collapsed onto the grass, his body screaming in protest as he gasped for air. But amidst the pain, he felt a sense of accomplishment, something deeper than just physical exhaustion. The results were announced quickly. Aizawa stood before them, his expression unreadable, holding up his tablet. The results are in, he said. His voice was calm, as though nothing unusual had happened. The one in last place is. The class waited in tense silence. The air was thick with anticipation. Minoru Mineta let out a wail, dropping to his knees dramatically. No, I can't be expelled. Please, Mr. Aizawa, Give me another chance. Aizawa sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. Relax. I wasn't serious about the expulsion. The class collectively gasped. You lied to us, Kaminari exclaimed, his voice full of disbelief. It was a logical ruse, Aizawa said with a shrug, his tone as indifferent as always. Heroes need to perform under pressure. If you can't handle the stress of a test, how will you handle real danger? Izuku felt an overwhelming sense of relief, as though a massive weight had been lifted from his shoulders. As the class began to disperse, Izuku noticed Momo approaching him, her expression thoughtful as always, composed and serene. Midoriya, she said, her voice soft but firm. You performed well today, your efforts are paying off. Gee, thanks, Izuku stammered, scratching the back of his head. You too, you were amazing. Momo smiled faintly. Hard work is key, it's clear you've been pushing your limits. Before she could leave, Izuku blurted, see, can I get your number? For, training tips and strategy stuff. Momo looked surprised, but then smiled kindly. Of course. As they exchanged numbers, Izuku's heart raced with a mixture of pride and nervous excitement. It was a small step, but to him, it meant everything. Just then, Bakugo's voice broke through the moment. Look at you, nerd, he called, a smirk on his face. Didn't think you had the guts. Shut up, Kachan. Izuku stammered, his face heating up as he shoved his phone into his pocket. Bakugo smirked but didn't press further. As Izuku turned toward the dorms, he felt a renewed sense of determination. Today had tested him, but he had risen to the challenge. Tomorrow, he promised himself, he'd do even better. The hum of conversation filled the air as Class 1A settled into their seats. The tension from the quirk assessment test the day before had mostly faded, replaced by a sense of relief and cautious optimism. No one had been expelled, despite Aizawa's harsh words, and that alone had been enough to boost everyone's spirits. Izuku sat at his desk, furiously scribbling notes in his ever-present hero notebook. He replayed the events of the test in his mind, analyzing every movement and decision he and his classmates had made. Beside him, Iida adjusted his glasses with his usual meticulousness, while Ochako leaned over, peeking at Izuku's notes. Midoriya, you're always so detailed with these, Ochako said with a laugh, her voice light and cheerful. How do you even remember all that? Izuku scratched the back of his head, chuckling nervously. It's just a habit. I want to make sure I can learn from everything, you know. Deku's just a nerd, Bakugo muttered from across the room, his arms crossed as he slouched in his seat. Though his words were harsh, his tone lacked the usual venom, almost as if he'd grudgingly accepted Izuku's growth. Before anyone could respond, the door slid open with a loud thud, and Aizawa entered, his sleeping bag slung over one shoulder. His disheveled hair and perpetually tired expression were as intimidating as ever, and the class quickly fell silent. Good, you're learning to shut up when I walk in, Aizawa muttered, dropping the sleeping bag on the floor. He scanned the room with his sharp, tired gaze. You survived yesterday's test. That's a start, but don't let it go to your heads. You're still far from being heroes. The class exchanged nervous glances, but no one dared to speak. Aizawa continued, pulling out a tablet and tapping on it. Today, we'll be shifting focus. You've had your physical capabilities tested. Now it's time to start applying your quirks in realistic scenarios. The room buzzed with quiet excitement. Izuku straightened in his seat, his heart pounding with anticipation. Aizawa's gaze sharpened. For that, you'll need guidance. Which is why. The door burst open, and a familiar booming voice filled the room. I am here. All Might strode in, his cape billowing dramatically behind him, his ever-present smile radiating confidence. The room erupted into cheers and gasps of excitement. All Might, Izuku exclaimed, his eyes lighting up. Even after seeing him so many times, the sight of his idol never failed to inspire awe. All Might struck a pose at the front of the classroom, his presence filling the space. Today, we'll be conducting a battle training exercise. Real combat situations are where heroes truly shine, and it's time for you all to experience what it's like to face villains head-on. Aizawa sighed, muttering under his breath about All Might's theatrics, but he didn't interrupt. All Might gestured dramatically to a monitor that flickered to life behind him. You'll also be receiving your hero costumes. Your designs were based on the requests you submitted before enrollment, so they should suit your fighting styles. The class erupted in excitement. The reveal. Izuku's hero suit. In the locker room, Izuku opened the case containing his hero suit. He hesitated, his heart racing as he recalled the inspiration for the design, a symbol of freedom and strength. When he stepped out onto the training field, his classmates turned to look, many of them visibly impressed. Izuku's suit mirrored Shanks' attire from One Piece, a flowing black cape draped over one shoulder, a loose white shirt tucked into dark pants, and sturdy brown boots. A red sash tied around his waist completed the look, giving him a roguish, confident air. "Wow, Midoriya," Ochako exclaimed, her eyes wide. "That's so cool." Izuku rubbed the back of his neck, his face flushed. I thought it'd be a good fit for me. Something simple, but meaningful." "It suits you," Momo added, her tone thoughtful. Her own hero suit, a sleek red leotard with gold accents, was both elegant and practical, designed to maximize her quirk's efficiency. "PFF'd, what kind of hero wears a pirate costume?" Bakugo sneered, though his usual fire wasn't behind the comment. Izuku stood a little straighter, his grip on the hilt of the sword at his side tightening. "It's not just a costume. It's a reminder, to protect the people I care about." The class buzzed with anticipation as All Might gestured to a small box sitting on a table near him. The students stood in a semicircle, their new hero costumes gleaming in the sunlight. "This box," All Might began, his voice booming, "contains numbered cards to determine your teams. Team A will be the heroes, and Team B will play the villains for the first match. Remember, this is about strategy and teamwork." Izuku adjusted the hilt of the wooden sword at his side. It felt strange but oddly comforting, hanging from the sash of his Shanks-inspired hero outfit. He glanced at Momo, standing nearby, her red and gold outfit as elegant as ever. She caught his eye and offered him a calm nod, which helped settle his nerves. "Now, draw your lots," All Might instructed, waving a hand toward the box. Each student approached in turn, drawing a card from the box. Izuku stared at his with wide eyes. Momo walked up next and returned with her card. "Looks like we're on the same team," she said, her voice steady. "This should be interesting." Izuku smiled nervously. "Why yeah, let's give it our best." On the other side, Bakugo and Iida were designated Team B. Bakugo grinned wickedly, his hands already crackling with tiny explosions. The teams were led to opposite sides of Training Ground Beta. Team A's mission was simple: infiltrate the building where the bomb was located and secure it. Team B's job was to guard the bomb and stop the heroes at all costs. Momo and Izuku stood outside the mock building, strategizing. "Bakugo will rush us," Momo said, frowning slightly. "He's aggressive and impulsive, but Iida will balance that out with his strategic mind. We'll need to stay flexible." Izuku nodded, gripping the hilt of his sword. "I'll try to handle Kachan. You focus on finding the bomb. I'll back you up as soon as I can." Momo hesitated, then gave him a small smile. "Be careful, Midoriya. Let's trust each other to do our parts." All Might's voice boomed across the training ground. "Begin." Izuku and Momo entered the building cautiously. The air inside was tense and dimly lit, the flickering lights adding an eerie atmosphere. They crept through the first floor, sticking close to the walls. Without warning, a deafening boom echoed through the corridor ahead. The narrow hallway trembled with the force of Bakugo's opening explosion, debris scattering like shrapnel as the walls bore scorch marks from his fiery assault. Izuku stood firm, his sword drawn, the faint gleam of armament Haki coating the blade's edge. "You've been hiding a lot, haven't you, Deku?" Bakugo sneered, his crimson eyes gleaming with fiery intensity. "But it doesn't matter how strong you've gotten. I'm still gonna crush you." Izuku's grip on his sword tightened. "I'm not hiding anymore, Kachan. And I won't back down." The tension snapped as Bakugo lunged forward, palm glowing with explosive energy. "Die." Izuku moved instinctively, observation Haki guiding his body. His blade sliced through the air, intercepting Bakugo's blast in a fiery clash. Sparks and smoke erupted around them as the shockwave rattled the hallway. Bakugo skidded back, his grin widening. "You think swinging a sword around makes you a match for me?" Izuku didn't respond, his breathing steady as he shifted into a defensive stance. His eyes focused solely on Bakugo's movements, every muscle in his body coiled like a spring. Bakugo charged again, this time feinting left before spinning midair, unleashing a cluster of small explosions in rapid succession. The hallway was a blur of heat and light as the blasts tore through the air. Izuku darted to the side, his sword moving like a shield, deflecting the explosions with precise, calculated slashes. Each swing left trails of faint energy, the armament Haki reinforcing the blade's strength. "I'm not just swinging," Izuku countered, closing the distance between them in a single, fluid motion. His sword arced downward in a diagonal slash, forcing Bakugo to leap back. The blade sliced through the ground, leaving a deep, clean gouge in the floor. Bakugo's eyes narrowed. "TCH, so you've learned a few tricks." He thrust his hands forward, palms wide. "But let's see how long you can keep up." Bakugo's barrage. The air around them ignited as Bakugo unleashed a relentless barrage of explosions. The force of the blasts created a storm of fire and smoke, obscuring the hallway and forcing Izuku to retreat. "Running already?" Bakugo taunted, his voice cutting through the roar of explosions. Izuku planted his feet, using his sword to deflect an incoming blast. The heat scorched his sleeve, but he held his ground. "I'm not running," he shouted, dashing forward through the smoke. The two clashed in a flurry of motion, Bakugo's fist sparking with explosive power, Izuku's blade moving like a living extension of himself. Bakugo swung wildly, aiming for Izuku's torso, but Izuku parried the attack, twisting his body to avoid the follow-up blast. The hallway was a battlefield of fire and steel, each strike sending shockwaves through the air. Bakugo's explosions lit up the dim corridor, their heat searing the walls, while Izuku's sword strikes carved through the chaos with precision. Strategy in motion. Izuku could feel the strain in his arms as he deflected another explosive punch. Bakugo wasn't just powerful, he was relentless, pressing every advantage with feral intensity. But Izuku wasn't fighting blindly. His observation Haki gave him a fraction of a second to read Bakugo's movements, and he used that time to adapt. Bakugo lunged again, aiming a blast at Izuku's face. Izuku sidestepped, using the flat of his blade to redirect the explosion downward. The blast cratered the floor, and Izuku took the opening to counterattack. Now, he slashed upward, forcing Bakugo to block with his gauntlet. The impact sent Bakugo sliding back, his feet scraping against the floor. "You're getting cocky," Bakugo snarled, launching himself forward with an explosion. Izuku ducked under the attack, pivoting behind Bakugo. Before Bakugo could react, Izuku swung his sword in a wide arc, the blade's edge glinting with energy. Bakugo twisted midair, using an explosion to propel himself out of range. He landed on the ground, panting slightly. "You're starting to piss me off, Deku." Izuku stood his ground, the tip of his sword pointed at Bakugo. "That's because I'm not the same as before. I'm done being afraid of you." The clash intensifies. Bakugo's expression darkened. He spread his arms wide, the grenade-like gauntlets on his wrists glowing ominously. "Fine, then, let's end this." The gauntlets discharged a massive explosion, the force so intense it shook the entire building. The wave of fire and debris surged toward Izuku like a tidal wave. Izuku didn't flinch. He planted his feet and raised his sword, channeling all his focus into armament Haki. The blade shimmered with dark energy as he swung with all his might. The clash was cataclysmic. The explosion met Izuku's sword head-on, splitting around him like water against a rock. The hallway was engulfed in smoke and ash, the air thick with the acrid smell of burnt metal. When the dust cleared, Izuku stood in the center of the destruction, his sword glowing faintly. He was battered, his coat torn and his breathing heavy, but his resolve was unshaken. Bakugo staggered, his gauntlets cracked from the force of his own attack. His eyes burned with frustration, but there was also a flicker of grudging respect. "You're still standing," he muttered. Izuku straightened, pointing his sword at Bakugo. "Because I won't give up." Kirishima slammed his hands on the desk, leaning forward. "Whoa, look at those explosions. Bakugo's going all out." "That's nothing new," Kaminari added, wincing as the screen lit up with another fiery blast. "But seriously, when did Midoriya get a sword?" Todoroki's gaze was calm, but there was a flicker of curiosity in his mismatched eyes. "It's not just the sword." He's using some kind of technique to deflect Bakugo's attacks. His footwork is incredible, Tsuyu observed, her finger tapping her chin. He's not just dodging, he's predicting Bakugo's moves. Meanwhile, Mineta clutched his head. Are they trying to destroy the whole building? Focus. Aizawa's sharp voice silenced the room. His eyes narrowed at the screen. Watch closely. Both of them are pushing their limits. Back in the main hallway, the fight reached its climax. Both Izuku and Bakugo were battered and bruised, their energy reserves nearly depleted. Bakugo growled, his palms sparking faintly. This ends now. Izuku's sword trembled in his hands, but he steadied his grip. You're right. Let's finish this. They charged at each other, the hallway shaking with the force of their final attacks. Bakugo's explosion was larger than ever, a roaring inferno that consumed everything in its path. Izuku met it head-on, swinging his sword with all the armament Haki he could muster. The collision was cataclysmic. The explosion and sword strike collided, creating a massive shockwave that blew out windows and sent debris flying. When the smoke cleared, both Izuku and Bakugo were lying on the floor, unable to move. A draw is declared. In the observation room, silence reigned for a moment. Then, Kirishima broke the tension. They're both down. That was insane. Midoriya managed to keep up with Bakugo, Todoroki noted, a hint of surprise in his voice. That's impressive. They're equals now, Uraraka said softly, her eyes wide. Aizawa leaned back, his expression unreadable. Looks like this one's a draw. Both of them gave it everything they had. Elsewhere in the building, Momo was locked in a strategic duel with Iida. I won't let you pass, Yaoyorozu. Iida declared, his engines roaring as he dashed forward with blinding speed. Momo calmly reached into her utility belt, which was brimming with creations she had prepared in advance. As Iida charged, she threw a smoke bomb to the ground, filling the hallway with thick, choking clouds. Iida skidded to a stop, coughing. Tactical retreat. That won't save you. From the smoke, a pair of caltrops scattered across the floor. Iida narrowly avoided stepping on them, his enhanced reflexes kicking in. Momo's voice echoed from the cloud. Iida, you rely too much on linear speed. But what happens if I take away your ability to move freely? The smoke cleared just in time to reveal Momo holding a shield and a polearm. She had also placed several sticky traps on the floor. Predictable, Iida shouted, leaping over the traps. Momo anticipated this. Using her polearm, she vaulted over Iida, spinning midair to block his retaliatory kick with her shield. They landed in a stalemate, both breathing heavily. I expected no less from you, Yaoyorozu, Iida admitted. And I from you, she replied, smiling faintly. The battle between Momo and Iida continued, their movements calculated and precise. Iida's speed was impressive, but Momo's quick thinking and resourcefulness were turning the tide. You're cornered now, Yaoyorozu, Iida declared as he dashed forward, his engines roaring louder than ever. But Momo had been planning for this. As Iida closed the gap, she activated a device she had been assembling behind her back, a small, portable EMP generator. The device emitted a burst of energy, and Iida's engine sputtered and died mid-charge. What? Iida exclaimed, his momentum faltering as he stumbled to a stop. Momo seized the opportunity. Using her polearm, she swept Iida's legs out from under him, sending him sprawling to the ground. Before he could recover, she pointed the sharp end of the polearm at his chest. It's over, Iida, she said, her voice calm but firm. You're immobilized. Iida's voice rang out behind her. You've bested me, Yaoyorozu. Go claim your victory. Reaching the bomb, Momo stretched out her hand, her fingertips brushing its surface. A siren blared throughout the training arena. Victory declared. All Might's voice boomed over the intercom. The training exercise is over. The hero team wins. The observation room erupted in cheers and applause. Kirishima pumped his fist into the air. Yes, way to go, Yaoyorozu and Midoriya. That was incredible, Uraraka added, practically bouncing in place. Momo's strategy was perfect. Todoroki nodded. Her ability to plan ahead gave her the edge. And Midoriya holding off Bakugo, impressive teamwork. Bakugo, still sitting against the wall and catching his breath, scowled. Damn nerds, I should have won. After the exercise, as the students regrouped in the observation room, Izuku and Momo were the center of attention. Kaminari clapped Izuku on the back, grinning. Dude, when did you become a sword fighter? That was awesome. And Momo, that EMP was genius, Jiro added, giving her a thumbs up. Momo thanked them politely, but her eyes kept drifting to Izuku, who was still leaning against the wall, exhausted but smiling faintly. She approached him as the rest of the class dispersed. You did well out there, Midoriya, she said softly, her tone warm. Izuku straightened up, blushing slightly. Thanks, Yaoyorozu. You were amazing. That EMP, I didn't even know you could make something like that so quickly. Momo tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, her cheeks tinged with a faint blush. It's all about preparation, but honestly, I think you were the star of the show. Facing Bakugo like that, it was incredible. Izuku rubbed the back of his neck, laughing nervously. I don't know about that. You're the one who secured the win for us. There was a brief pause as they both smiled at each other, the atmosphere between them light and comfortable. I was thinking, Momo began, if you're open to it, maybe we could train together sometime. You've been improving so much, and I think we could learn a lot from each other. Izuku's eyes widened, and he nodded quickly. Why yeah, I'd love that. You're one of the smartest people in our class, so I'd be honored. Momo smiled, her confidence shining through. Then it's settled. Let's make each other even better. As she walked away to join the others, Izuku watched her go, a small, determined smile forming on his face. He was exhausted, but he felt a renewed sense of purpose. Today wasn't just a victory, it was a step forward. The atmosphere in Class 1A was still buzzing after the class representative election. Izuku sat at his desk, staring at the paper tally in disbelief. He had never expected to be chosen as the leader of their class, yet here he was, Midoriya Izuku, Class 1A's representative. He exhaled deeply. I have to do my best. Everyone's counting on me. Aizawa stirred from his sleeping bag, rubbing his eyes as he spoke. All right, since you've got your representative and vice representative sorted out, let's move on. He stretched and pulled out his phone, scrolling through what looked like an itinerary. Tomorrow, we're heading to an external training facility. It's called the Unforeseen Simulation Joint, or USJ, he announced. You'll be practicing rescue operations in different simulated disaster zones. Pro Hero 13 will be leading the lesson, and I expect you all to listen and learn. A wave of excitement spread through the class. Whoa, that sounds cool, Kirishima said, punching his palm. Rescue training, huh, Zero added. It'll be nice to do something other than combat practice. Rescue operations are just as important as combat, Iida declared. A true hero must be able to save lives efficiently. Aizawa ignored the chatter and continued, be here on time tomorrow. We leave first thing in the morning. Dismissed. As students packed up to leave, Momo approached Izuku. Midoriya, don't forget about our training session later, she reminded him. Right, I'll meet you at the training hall after school, he confirmed. Training with Momo. Later that evening, Izuku and Momo met in one of UA's private training rooms. The space was quiet except for the faint hum of the air system. Momo had prepared a set of wooden swords, placing them neatly on a rack. Let's start with some footwork drills, she said. You have good instincts, but you hesitate in the middle of a fight. That can be dangerous against unpredictable opponents. Izuku nodded and gripped the wooden sword. Momo took her stance, fluid and composed, before launching into a series of precise strikes. Izuku blocked as best he could, but Momo's technique was nearly flawless. You're reading my movements well, but your counters are slow, Momo pointed out. React faster. Izuku adjusted his grip and tried again. With each round, he improved little by little. Momo was patient yet relentless, forcing him to keep up. After an hour, they took a break. Both were breathing heavily but satisfied with their progress. You're improving quickly, Momo said with a small smile. Izuku wiped sweat from his forehead. Thanks, Yaoyorozu. This was really helpful, she nodded. We'll continue this training when we have time. A hero must always strive to be better. Izuku grinned. Right, the USJ excursion begins. The next morning, Class 1A gathered outside, waiting for the school bus. The excitement among the students was palpable. Rescue training, huh, this is gonna be awesome, Kirishima said, grinning. I wonder what kind of disasters they'll simulate, Uraraka mused. The USJ is supposed to be one of the most advanced training facilities at UA, Momo added. It's divided into different zones, each replicating real-world rescue scenarios. As the bus arrived, the students boarded, taking their seats like a normal bus, in rows rather than the circular layout they initially expected. The bus rumbled steadily down the long highway, its interior bathed in the soft glow of the early morning sun streaming through the windows. Unlike the chaotic circular seating arrangement of their previous trip, today's bus was arranged in neat rows, each student occupying a standard seat. The usual buzz of chatter filled the compartment as classmates exchanged excited remarks about the upcoming rescue training at USJ. Yet amid the laughter and chatter, a quieter conversation was about to unfold. Izuku sat near the middle of the bus, his eyes fixed on the view outside as his thoughts drifted between the events of the past day and the uncertain challenges ahead. He absent-mindedly thumbed through the pages of his hero notebook, which was filled with detailed notes and sketches from previous training sessions. Every so often, he caught himself smiling at a memory of a breakthrough in technique or a hard-won lesson from a sparring match. But today, his mind kept returning to his promise with Momo, the promise of training together and growing stronger as heroes. Just then, a soft knock on the seat beside him signaled the arrival of Momo Yaoyorozu. She slid gracefully into the seat next to his, her posture poised and confident. For a moment, the ambient noise of the bus seemed to fade away, replaced by the quiet warmth of her presence. "Do you mind if I sit here?" Momo asked softly, her dark eyes meeting his. There was a gentle kindness in her voice that immediately put Izuku at ease. "Of course not," he replied, his voice a bit breathless. "I'm glad you're here." For a few moments, they sat in comfortable silence as the bus sped along the highway. Outside, the scenery blurred into a collage of golden fields and distant cityscapes, while inside, the conversation began to flow as naturally as if it had always been meant to be. Momo leaned slightly toward Izuku, her tone quiet and thoughtful. "I was thinking about our training session yesterday," she said, glancing down at his open notebook. "You've been working so hard on your footwork and reactions. I can see the improvement already, and I believe that with a little more focus, you can really excel." Izuku's cheeks flushed at her praise, and he fiddled with the strap of his bag. Thank you, Yaoyorozu. Sometimes I worry I'm not progressing fast enough, that I'm still too clumsy when it counts." Her gaze softened, and she offered him a reassuring smile. "Everyone has their own pace, Midoriya. What matters is that you never stop trying. I see the determination in you every time you fight. It's inspiring." Izuku's heart beat a little faster at her words. There was something reassuring and undeniably sincere in the way she looked at him, a mixture of respect and gentle encouragement that made him feel both understood and capable. I really appreciate that," he said, his voice quieter now, almost intimate amidst the hum of the bus engine. For a while, they talked about their aspirations, their struggles, and the challenges of being heroes. Momo shared some of her own experiences, explaining how years of study and rigorous training had shaped her approach to using her quirk. Izuku listened intently, his eyes never leaving hers, as if trying to memorize every detail of her wisdom. "I sometimes feel overwhelmed by everything I have to learn," Izuku admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "There's so much to master. My haki, my sword techniques, and even just controlling my emotions in battle." Momo reached out, placing a gentle hand on his arm. "I understand, Midoriya. But remember, the path to becoming a hero isn't just about power or technique, it's also about heart. You have a kind heart and a strong will, and that will carry you far." Her touch was light, almost fleeting, yet it sent a warm current through him, dispelling some of his doubts. The conversation deepened as the bus continued on its journey. They discussed strategies for improving in both combat and rescue scenarios, brainstorming ideas on how to combine their strengths in training. Momo's logical perspective balanced perfectly with Izuku's earnest determination. At one point, she even mentioned a few theoretical tactics she had read about, suggesting ways to optimize the use of his observation haki in high-pressure situations. Outside, the landscape shifted, and as the bus neared the USJ, a sense of anticipation settled over them both. The world beyond the windows grew grander, with sprawling fields giving way to a massive, domed structure that gleamed with futuristic metal. The USJ was finally in sight, a symbol of both promise and challenge. Izuku's pulse quickened as he watched the facility approach. "I'm a bit nervous," he confessed softly, his voice laced with vulnerability. "This place, it feels so real. What if I can't handle what we're about to face?" Momo's eyes met his, steady and kind. "You will, Midoriya. I believe in you. We all believe in you." She smiled, and for a moment, the noise of the bus and the world outside fell away, leaving just the two of them in a quiet moment of understanding. As the bus pulled up at the USJ, the students gathered their things and prepared to disembark. Momo squeezed his hand gently before they rose from their seats, a small gesture that conveyed volumes. Izuku felt a warmth spread through him as he looked at her, his determination renewed not just by the prospect of the training ahead, but by the genuine connection they had forged in those few precious moments on the bus. With the USJ looming in the distance and the promise of a new challenge ahead, Izuku took one last deep breath and stepped off the bus, ready to face whatever trials awaited him, knowing that, at least for now, he wasn't alone. The facility was massive, a giant dome structure with sleek metal walls. As they entered, they were greeted by Pro Hero 13, whose space-themed suit gleamed under the lights. "Welcome, Class 1A," 13 said enthusiastically. "Today, we'll be covering rescue operations. As heroes, saving people is just as important, if not more important, than fighting villains." Aizawa stepped forward, arms crossed. "The USJ is divided into various disaster zones: landslides, floods, fires, collapsed buildings. Your job is to practice rescuing civilians under these conditions." The class looked around in awe as they stepped further inside. They could see artificial rivers, rocky terrain, and even a simulated ruined city in the distance. "This place is amazing," Kaminari said, eyes wide. "It's incredibly detailed," Todoroki noted, scanning the different zones. 13 continued, "Remember, your quirks are powerful, but in rescue situations, they can also be dangerous. Control and precision are key." Before they could start, something strange happened. A low, eerie sound filled the air. The lights flickered, and then, a dark, swirling mist formed in the center of the facility. A group of shadowy figures emerged. Aizawa's eyes immediately sharpened. He pushed his goggles up and stepped in front of the students. "Stay back," he ordered. A deep voice chuckled from within the mist. "You think you can stop us, Eraserhead?" A villain stepped forward, clad in darkness. "We're here for All Might. But if he's not around..." The villain's grin widened. "We'll just have to kill you instead." A shiver ran through the students as the realization hit them: this wasn't part of the training. This was real. The villains spread out, surrounding the class. Aizawa wasted no time, leaping forward and engaging the closest enemies. 13. Get the students out of here. Before they could retreat, the swirling mist villain, Kurogiri, expanded his quirk. Dark portals opened beneath the students, swallowing them up and scattering them across different zones of the USJ. Izuku barely had time to react before he felt the pull of the portal. His surroundings twisted, and he landed hard in a water terrain. Looking up, he found himself in the water zone, alone. Or so he thought. A group of villains stalked toward him, grinning maliciously. Izuku clenched his fists. "I have to fight. I have to survive." Izuku landed with a splash, cold water rushing up to his knees as he steadied himself. The murky depths of the shipwreck zone surrounded him, a half-sunken ferry tilting ominously in the distance. The air was thick with tension, and the faint sound of moving water sent a chill down his spine. Then he saw them. A group of villains waded through the water, their grins sharp and menacing. Their leader, a tall, muscular man with gills lining his neck, cracked his knuckles. Izuku's breath came out in sharp, icy bursts as he eyed the villains before him. The water splashed around him, the cold seeping into his bones, but he ignored the chill. His focus was entirely on the 5 menacing figures in front of him. The guild villain was the biggest threat, but the others couldn't be underestimated either. "Ready to lose, kid?" The leader taunted, cracking his knuckles again, the sound reverberating through the empty space. His gills fluttered as he spoke, and his shark-like grin only added to the dangerous atmosphere. "We'll make sure you never make it out of here alive." Izuku stood tall despite the odds. His gaze never wavered from his opponents as his mind raced. Observation Haki, Keep track of them. Armament Haki. Make sure every hit counts. He didn't have time for hesitation, not with Momo relying on him to take down the leader. The leader lunged forward with blinding speed, but Izuku had already anticipated the move. He stepped to the side, his body shifting fluidly with the water, as the guild villain's fist missed its target by mere inches. Without wasting a moment, Izuku raised his arm, coated with armament Haki, and countered with a powerful punch to the villain's side. The impact sent shockwaves through the water, but the villain grinned through the pain, seemingly unfazed. Not bad, kid, he sneered, shaking out his arm. But you'll have to do better than that. Izuku's muscles screamed with effort as he prepared for the next attack. The villains didn't give him a second to breathe. One of them, armed with a spiked chain, swung the weapon toward him with lethal intent. The chain hissed through the air, and Izuku raised his forearms in defense, coating them in armament Haki just in time. The chain wrapped around his forearms with a sharp, metallic clang, but his Haki absorbed the shock. With a grunt, Izuku yanked the chain forward, using the villain's momentum against him. The villain was caught off balance, and Izuku twisted his body, preparing to strike when the leader barreled into him. The punch was like a freight train. Izuku barely managed to reinforce his side with Haki, but the blow sent him skidding through the water, his feet dragging against the slippery surface. He gritted his teeth against the pain as his side flared in protest. Focus, Izuku. Don't give up now. He pushed himself up, the guild villain sneering at his apparent weakness. You're tougher than I thought, but not tough enough. Izuku took a deep breath, his grip tightening around his fists. The swelling pain in his side faded as he calmed his mind. He wasn't just relying on his brute strength, he had to think, strategize. The observation Haki would give him the edge he needed. With a surge of power, he launched himself at the villains. The air around him crackled with raw energy as his fists hardened with Haki. The guild villain reacted too slowly as Izuku's uppercut, enhanced with Haki, sent him flying into the wreckage of the sunken ferry. The impact echoed through the water, and the villain let out a pained grunt before slumping unconscious. One down. Izuku didn't have time to savor the victory. As soon as he landed, the remaining villains came at him in a rush. The one with the chain swung it again, aiming for his head. Izuku ducked under the attack, only to be met with a sudden blast of light. The villain staggered back as the beam sliced through the air, forcing the others to dive into the water for cover. Momo. Izuku gasped, looking up. Midoriya, are you all right? Momo's voice rang through the air, full of concern. She stood on a nearby floating platform, her cannon smoking from the recent blast. I'm fine, Izuku called back, a grin spreading across his face as relief washed over him. We need to take them out fast. Momo nodded, her eyes scanning the battlefield. I'll handle the long-range fighters. You take care of the leader. Izuku clenched his fists, feeling the weight of his responsibility. Got it. The villains regrouped, their anger simmering. One of them, a tall man with a thick beard and a wicked grin, shouted, "You brats are gonna regret that." Izuku's heart pounded in his chest as he locked eyes with the leader of the villains. The guild man's sneer twisted further into a vicious grin, his confidence unshaken by Izuku's earlier blows. He cracked his knuckles again, the sound echoing in the stillness of the shipwrecked zone. The other villains watched eagerly, knowing the fight wasn't over yet. Izuku's mind raced, analyzing the situation. He couldn't afford to make any mistakes, especially with Momo relying on him to neutralize the leader. His muscles were already burning, but he forced himself to push through. He had to win this. The leader charged again, his gills fluttering wildly as his body surged forward like a battering ram. Izuku braced himself, the familiar sensation of his armament Haki coursing through his body. He twisted sideways to avoid the leader's first strike, a powerful right hook, but the villain anticipated it, switching up his attack mid-swing and slamming his elbow into Izuku's ribcage. Izuku grunted as the impact reverberated through his body, but he didn't lose his footing. He ducked low, narrowly avoiding another powerful punch aimed at his head. With his left hand, he gripped the leader's arm, using his momentum against him. The guild villain roared, attempting to twist out of Izuku's hold, but the young hero reinforced his grip with Haki. I'm not letting you go, Izuku shouted, his voice gritty with determination. The leader's eyes flared with anger, his teeth bared. "You're stubborn, I'll give you that. But it won't matter. You're just a kid playing hero." With a burst of strength, the leader threw Izuku backward, sending him tumbling through the water. He slid across the slick surface, narrowly avoiding hitting a jagged piece of the wrecked ferry. His head spun from the force of the throw, but he quickly regained his footing. "I need to end this," Izuku thought, clenching his fists again. Meanwhile, high above him, Momo was calculating her next move. Her eyes flicked between the villainous group and Izuku, knowing that the longer this dragged on, the more dangerous the situation became. With a quick glance at Izuku, she nodded to herself. In a flash, she raised her hand, and a glowing light formed around her. From the air, she crafted a sword, a long, gleaming blade forged from a high-density metal that shimmered with the elegance of precision. The blade was sharp, sturdy, and perfect for close combat. "Izuku," Momo called down, "I'm sending you a sword." Izuku's eyes widened in surprise as the blade appeared, its hilt just within reach. Without hesitation, he grasped the hilt, feeling the weight settle into his hand. The sword felt like an extension of himself, light yet powerful, perfect for his next strike. He had just the plan. The leader took advantage of his momentary distraction, lunging at him with a malicious roar, his fists raised to strike. But this time, Izuku was ready. His haki flared again, the blackened energy enveloping his body, and he steadied himself, focusing entirely on his next move. He gripped the sword, his focus sharper than ever. As the leader's punch came hurtling toward him, Izuku twisted, his body coiling like a spring. "King's Slash!" Izuku roared. He swung the sword in a wide arc, infusing it with his haki, and the impact sent a shockwave of energy through the water. The blade cut through the air like lightning, its edge glowing with power. The leader's punch met the sword's blade, but the force of Izuku's strike was too much. The leader's momentum was stopped dead in its tracks as Izuku pushed forward with all his strength, the sword slashing cleanly through the villain's attack and connecting with his chest. The sound of metal cutting flesh rang out as the sword slid across the leader's body, leaving a deep gash. The leader staggered back, shock flashing across his face as he looked down at the wound. Blood began to trickle from the wound, but even as it spilled, the villain's anger only seemed to grow. "Damn brat," he snarled, a furious snarl twisting his face as he gripped his chest. "You think that little sword is going to stop me?" Izuku didn't answer. He was already in motion, his mind focused entirely on the leader's weakness. The villain had no idea just how strong Izuku's resolve was now. With another sharp intake of breath, Izuku summoned more power, pushing the limits of his haki. "I'm not done yet." In a blur of motion, Izuku charged once more, his body a flash of green and black. He swung the sword again, this time aiming for the villain's side, where his defenses were weaker. The leader barely managed to block the strike with his arm, but the sheer force of the blow sent him stumbling back. But Izuku wasn't finished. The water around them splashed violently as he closed the distance, his legs moving with precision. He stepped forward and, in a fluid motion, spun, driving the sword deep into the leader's side with a precise thrust. "Midoriya, now!" Momo called from above, her voice filled with urgency. Izuku felt the sword's tip sink deep, the resistance of the leader's flesh and bone giving way to his sheer willpower. The leader's eyes widened, but it wasn't fear that filled them, it was pure, unrelenting rage. The leader swung his fist in a final, desperate attempt to take Izuku down, but with a swift motion, Izuku dropped low, avoiding the attack. He then twisted the blade in the leader's side, twisting with the momentum of his own body as he performed a quick, devastating counter. The guild villain let out a final, guttural scream as he collapsed into the water, his body sinking into the depths with the weight of defeat. Izuku stood over him, panting heavily but resolute. His sword gleamed in the water, the fight won. But it wasn't over yet. Momo's voice rang out once more. "We still have more to deal with." Izuku took a deep breath and nodded, ready for whatever came next. But for now, he had taken down the leader. And with Momo's help, they were one step closer to winning. The water settled. The remaining villains paused, hesitation creeping into their expressions. "That's enough," the bearded villain shouted. "We'll deal with you later." Momo wasted no time. From her vantage point, she aimed her cannon and fired a beam of light, striking one of the long-range attackers who had been hiding behind a piece of debris. The beam cut through the air, and the villain collapsed into the water, unconscious. "Midoriya, it's over. We've won." Izuku nodded, breathing heavily, but his body still tense. For now. Bakugo and Todoroki's battle extended. Bakugo's explosions reverberated through the air as he took on a group of villains in the landslide zone. The terrain was difficult, with jagged rocks and debris littering the area, but that didn't faze him. His blood boiled with adrenaline, and he was itching for a fight. "Let's do this, you damn nerds," Bakugo yelled, his palms sparking as he took a step forward, his stance aggressive. "I'll blow you all to pieces." A burly villain, with stone-like skin, charged toward Bakugo, his body massive and imposing. Bakugo's eyes narrowed, but he didn't flinch. With a burst of explosions, he propelled himself into the air and twisted, delivering a devastating kick to the villain's jaw. The villain crashed into a boulder, but he quickly recovered, his rocky skin beginning to glow with an ominous light. Bakugo didn't wait for him to get up. With a snap of his fingers, he released a barrage of smaller explosions, each one hitting the villain with pinpoint accuracy, sending him tumbling back into the rocks. "Pathetic," Bakugo muttered, turning to face the rest of the villains who had been watching. Todoroki, meanwhile, remained calm, his ice powers at the ready. He raised his hand, his left side emanating an intense chill as ice rapidly spread across the ground. Villains were trapped by the freezing ground, their movements restricted. One villain, armed with a blade, leapt toward Todoroki, hoping to catch him off guard. But before the villain could strike, Bakugo intervened, unleashing a massive explosion that sent the assailant flying backward. "Stay out of my way, icy hot," Bakugo growled. Todoroki didn't respond. Instead, he focused on freezing the remaining villains in place with precise ice formations, trapping them in icy prisons. One by one, the villains fell, either frozen or knocked unconscious by the combination of Todoroki's ice and Bakugo's explosive onslaught. The battlefield quieted, and Bakugo wiped the sweat from his brow. "Ha, that was too easy." Todoroki, his face impassive, nodded. "We should regroup with the others." Bakugo scowled. Yeah, but let's make it quick. I'm not wasting time with these weaklings." Todoroki glanced toward the central plaza, where more chaos raged. "This isn't over yet." Aizawa versus. The Nomu extended. Aizawa's movements were smooth, precise, as he battled the growing horde of villains that rushed toward him. His capture weapon lashed out, ensnaring one villain after another, slamming them into the ground. His quirk deactivation skills were top tier, but the enemies just kept coming. Another villain lunged at him, hoping to land a punch, but Aizawa sidestepped, deactivating his quirk in an instant. The villain's expression shifted from one of cocky confidence to confusion as his power faded. Aizawa used the moment to elbow the villain in the stomach, sending him crumpling to the ground. But then, the ground trembled. A deep, guttural growl echoed through the chaos, and Aizawa's senses immediately flared. The Nomu stepped forward, its massive, monstrous form making the other villains look like children. It was faster than Aizawa anticipated, and before he could react, the creature launched forward with a devastating punch. The blow missed by inches, but Aizawa was already on the move, darting to the side with his capture weapon ready. He tried to strike at its joints, hoping to weaken the creature, but his blow didn't even faze it. The Nomu didn't flinch. Its shock absorption. Shigaraki's voice rang through the air, dripping with amusement. "You can't break it." Aizawa's mind raced as he dodged another attack. "I need a new plan." The Nomu was too strong, too fast. But he wasn't about to give up. With a growl, he lunged at Shigaraki, aiming to take out the mastermind behind the chaos. But before his scarf could reach Shigaraki, Kurogiri's portal whisked the villain away. The Nomu pressed on, its punches coming faster and harder, each blow forcing Aizawa back. He barely avoided one devastating strike, but the second one landed squarely in his ribs, sending him flying into the rubble. Blood trickled from his forehead, but Aizawa refused to stay down. His vision was blurry, his body screaming in protest, but he wasn't going to stop. Not while his students were fighting. With a roar of defiance, he rose to his feet. Heroes never give up. Ida's escape extended. Ida's engines roared to life as he sped toward the entrance, his mind locked on his goal. "Get help." Get reinforcements. That was the only thought driving him forward. But Kurogiri noticed. The portal villain tried to warp him back, but Iida was prepared. With a burst of speed, he leapt off a broken pillar, propelling himself through the air. The gates were in sight, and Iida wasn't about to let anyone stop him. With one final burst of speed, Iida crashed through the gates, his heart racing as he sprinted toward the main building. Help is on the way, he promised, determination in every step. The battle at USJ wasn't over yet. But hope still lived. The moment the villains warped into the USJ, the battlefield erupted into chaos. The students, scattered across different zones, were forced into fights far beyond their expectations. In the landslide zone, Kirishima and Shiro stood back to back against a group of villains. A towering brute with jagged, rock-like skin charged toward them, his fists like boulders. He was a monstrous figure, his every movement sending tremors through the unstable ground beneath their feet. Kirishima grinned, slamming his fists together. All right, let's see whose skin is tougher. His voice was full of confidence as he hardened his body, his skin now resembling an unbreakable wall of rock. The villain didn't hesitate, charging at full speed toward him. They collided in an explosion of sound and force. Kirishima's feet dug into the rocky terrain as the villain's fist connected with his chest, but his hardened form absorbed the shock without yielding an inch. The ground around them cracked and splintered as they continued to clash, each strike shaking the earth beneath them. Kirishima grinned wildly, his eyes gleaming with the thrill of the fight. His body was covered in a red sheen, his quirk making him nearly indestructible, but even he could feel the power behind each blow. That's what I like to see, Kirishima yelled, his voice booming. He slammed his fists into the villain's stomach with a powerful jab. The villain staggered back, but quickly recovered, swiping his massive fists in retaliation. Kirishima ducked and weaved, laughing as he avoided the blows. Shiro, meanwhile, was using the chaos to his advantage. His fingers twitched as he shot his tape, his body swiveling with precision as he moved from one spot to the next. His tape shot out in thick strands, securing the villains who were trying to flank them. They struggled, but Shiro was swift, his tape binding them in an unrelenting grip. Kirishima, keep him busy, Shiro shouted, propelling himself forward with the tape as he swung overhead. His legs shot forward, sending a burst of tape to incapacitate two of the villains who had tried sneaking up on them. I got your back, Shiro called, his eyes focused and determined. Kirishima grinned at him over his shoulder. Don't worry, I'm just getting started. He launched himself back into the fight, meeting the brute head on once again. He could feel the adrenaline coursing through him, every blow, every strike, a testament to how far he had come. But the villain wasn't done yet. With a growl, he swung his fists in rapid succession, forcing Kirishima to dodge with a swift leap. The brute was relentless, and with every move, it became clear that this wasn't going to be a quick victory. In the conflagration zone, Kaminari found himself surrounded by flames. The heat was unbearable, the fire crackling like a living beast, but it wasn't just the flames that worried him, it was the villains closing in from all sides. They were laughing, mocking him, as if his powers were a joke. Okay, don't panic, Kaminari muttered to himself, trying to keep his breathing steady as he watched the fire consume the surroundings. His heart raced, his mind scrambling for a plan, but his legs felt like jelly. There was no time to second-guess himself. He had to fight, and he had to do it now. One of the villains sneered, stepping closer, his eyes filled with arrogance. What's a little static supposed to do? The villain taunted, his voice dripping with mockery as he twirled a weapon in his hand. Do you think you can really beat me with that weak power? Kaminari's chest tightened with frustration. It wasn't that he wasn't trying, it was just that the villain's confidence in his rubber-insulated gear made him feel useless. But the pressure to defend his classmates, to stop the villains, was greater than anything else. He gritted his teeth. Guess you'll find out the hard way, he shouted, raising his arms as his body crackled with electricity. A surge of power shot through his fingers, arcs of energy illuminating the air around him. A burst of electricity shot out from him, striking multiple villains at once. They convulsed violently as the electricity coursed through them, their bodies twitching before they crumpled to the ground, unconscious. For a brief moment, he felt a sense of relief, until the next villain lunged at him, her rubber-insulated gloves gleaming in the firelight. Kaminari barely managed to dodge in time, the villain's fist grazing his cheek. "Seriously," he groaned, frustration evident in his voice. "Why do I always get the ones who counter me?" But he didn't have time to dwell on it. With a quick movement, he leapt to the side, narrowly avoiding another swing from the villain. His body pulsed with energy as he focused all his attention on staying alive, each dodge a desperate attempt to escape the overwhelming odds. Back in the flood zone, Asui and Mineta hid behind a floating wreckage, their eyes scanning the approaching villains. The dark, murky waters swirled around them, hiding the true extent of the dangers lurking below the surface. "We need to take them out before they get too close," Asui said calmly, her voice unwavering even in the face of danger. She crouched low, her large eyes darting over the villains who swam toward them, their movements slow but steady in the water. Mineta, however, was anything but calm. "Yeah, but how?" His small body trembled in fear, and he clutched his utility belt tightly. His eyes were wide with panic as he watched the villains get closer and closer. Asui blinked, her green skin glistening under the water's surface. She didn't answer right away, instead flicking her tongue out, wrapping it around Mineta's collar with the ease of a seasoned crow. Before Mineta could even react, she yanked him into the air and hurled him forward. "Wah! Ah!" Mineta screamed as he flew through the air, his body twisting as he tried to control his fall. But his hands were already reaching for the sticky balls he kept on hand, and with a panicked motion, he launched them down at the villains below. The water became an impassable trap as the sticky balls hit their mark, binding the villains together in a mess of limbs and wet clothing. They struggled, but the sticky substance held fast, preventing any escape. Mineta landed with a heavy thud on the wreckage, groaning in pain. "Next time, warn me first," he groaned, rolling onto his back, sore from the impact. Asui simply blinked at him, her calm demeanor unchanged. "Ribbit, we won, didn't we?" she said nonchalantly, watching the villains struggle helplessly below. Her eyes flicked back to Mineta, who was still catching his breath. The USJ was quickly becoming a war zone. Debris littered the ground, creating makeshift barricades. The once serene structure was now crumbling under the force of battle. And there, standing amidst the wreckage, was the Nomu, a towering beast of unfathomable power. Izuku Midoriya stood at the edge of the battlefield, his heart pounding. His hand clenched around the hilt of the sword he had just got from Momo, the sharp metal cold beneath his fingers. His eyes were locked on Aizawa-sensei, who lay broken and bloodied beneath the monstrous creature. His teacher, his protector, was barely clinging to life. The Nomu's grotesque form towered over Aizawa, its cruel eyes watching with amusement as the pro-hero struggled to move. The moment felt like it had frozen in time, a quiet, terrible calm before the storm of destruction that was sure to come. The sight of Aizawa's body, the blood pooling beneath him, his arm limp, was more than Izuku could handle. "Aizawa-sensei," he cried, his voice cracking with desperation. His body shook with the overwhelming urge to move, to act, to save his teacher. Aizawa's head turned slowly, his breath coming in shallow gasps. "Midoriya, run, you have to run." His words were weak, barely a whisper, but there was an intensity in his eyes that communicated everything Izuku needed to hear. Aizawa knew that the Nomu was beyond their abilities. But he had fought, he had hoped that somehow, the students would find a way to run. His gaze lingered on Izuku, willing him to find that solution. Shigaraki's twisted grin grew wider as he watched the exchange. "Oh, how sweet. The little hero wants to save his teacher," he taunted, his voice dripping with malice. He turned his cold, calculating gaze toward the students. "But it's already too late. The Nomu's already won." Izuku's grip tightened around the sword as he turned toward the monster that had caused so much destruction. The weight of Aizawa's words hung heavy in his mind. But there was no time to doubt, no time for fear. His resolve hardened like steel. "We'll stop you," Bakugo snarled, charging forward. His hands lit up with explosions, the force of the blasts lighting up the field as he rocketed forward. "You're not getting away with this." His voice rang out, filled with determination and rage as he hurtled toward the Nomu. Todoroki was next. With a stoic expression, he unleashed a blast of ice beneath his feet, the ground freezing as he moved with calculated precision. Flames roared from his right side, his ice and fire coalescing as he prepared for the next strike. The combination of cold and heat built within him, ready to break through any barrier. Momo, though not on the front lines, had been preparing herself. She wasn't the one to attack right now, but she could see the bigger picture. She quickly formed a set of knives, then launched them forward to support her teammates. She wasn't the strongest in combat, but she could provide her allies with the tools they needed to succeed. Izuku's mind raced. They had been successful before, combining their attacks in a moment of unity. But this time, the Nomu was different. They were up against a creature that could heal faster than they could strike. Their combined attacks had hardly scratched its surface. It was an unstoppable force. And that's when it hit him. They had to strike together, with everything they had. All-out attack, now. Izuku shouted, his voice full of resolve. It was more than just a call to action, it was a promise. They couldn't afford to hesitate. His shout cut through the tension, sparking an immediate response from his classmates. But there was no time for hesitation. The Nomu was already charging toward them, its dark eyes gleaming with a twisted, primal hunger. Bakugo, who had already launched himself into the fray, fired another round of explosive attacks, his hands glowing with the power of his quirk. Take this. AP shot. His explosions rocked the ground beneath them, and the force of his assault sent shockwaves through the air. But the Nomu didn't even flinch. It swatted Bakugo away like an insect, sending him hurtling into the debris with a heavy crash. Todoroki, his face set in grim determination, used his ice to slow the Nomu's advance. Ice wave. His left side released a surge of ice, freezing the ground beneath his feet and attempting to entrap the Nomu. The ice spread, trying to slow its momentum, but the Nomu shattered through it with terrifying force, its strength far beyond what the ice could contain. Momo, her brow furrowed with concentration, knew that they were running out of time. She wasn't one to back down in the face of danger, but seeing her classmates struggling against the Nomu, knowing that this creature was unlike anything they had faced before, made her realize just how outmatched they were. She wasn't a frontline fighter like Bakugo or Todoroki. Her strength lay in her intelligence and resourcefulness, something that she had always relied on to support her friends. But now, that same strategy seemed insufficient in the face of this monster. Izuku's heart pounded as he witnessed the Nomu's terrifying resilience. No matter what they did, it kept regenerating. The combined attacks of his friends didn't even faze it. They couldn't win this way. He clenched his teeth, his grip on his sword tightening, the weight of responsibility pressing down on him harder than ever before. They couldn't lose here, not after everything they had fought for. But just as he was about to rush forward, he saw Momo out of the corner of his eye, standing too close to the Nomu as it charged forward, determined to break through their defenses. His heart skipped a beat. Momo, he shouted in panic, but the sound of her name was lost in the chaos as she tried to retreat, her eyes wide with fear. The Nomu moved faster than anything he had ever seen, and in a split second, it was upon her, its massive fist raised to strike her down. Izuku's mind flashed. He couldn't reach her in time. He couldn't physically get there before the Nomu crushed her. But there was something inside him, something far deeper than his thoughts or his quirk, something primal that surged from the very core of his being. It was his Haki. The power, raw and untamed, erupted within him like a tidal wave crashing onto the shore. The air around him seemed to crackle, distorting as if the world itself was bending under the weight of his will. The pressure in the atmosphere intensified, so powerful that it felt like the very ground was shaking beneath him. No more. Izuku's voice was barely a whisper, but it carried with it a force so immense that it felt like the entire world had heard it. Momo, in the midst of her panic, froze. The moment the wave of sheer willpower hit her, her body locked up as if she were being restrained by invisible chains. The Nomu, too, paused in its tracks, its eyes wide in confusion, as if it were struggling against an unseen force. Shigaraki, who had been watching from the sidelines, stumbled back, his hands instinctively covering his face. What is this? His voice trembled with fear and disbelief. He had never felt something like this before, never sensed such raw, overwhelming dominance coming from a mere child. It was like the very will of the universe itself was being forced into submission. Momo, her breathing shallow and her heart racing, felt the overwhelming weight of Izuku's presence. It was suffocating, Like being trapped under the pressure of 1,000 storms, and yet she could feel an unmistakable warmth within it. This wasn't just power, it was protection. Izuku was protecting her, protecting them all. The force of his will was as if he had become the embodiment of something unstoppable, something untamable. Izuku's body shook with the intensity of the energy flowing through him. His eyes were wide, and his sword vibrated in his hand, almost as if it, too, were reacting to the surge of Haki that was pouring out of him. It was as if time itself had slowed around him, and for a moment, he could only focus on the force inside him that was rippling outward, encompassing everything around him. He could see Momo standing frozen, the fear still evident in her eyes, but she was alive. She was safe for now. With a deep breath, Izuku forced himself to regain control, focusing the power that had erupted within him. The pressure around them lifted slightly, but the sensation of his overwhelming will still hung in the air like an unspoken threat. His muscles ached from the strain, but he refused to let go. He couldn't let Momo, or any of his friends, be hurt. "Get back," he shouted, his voice carrying the force of the storm that was still surging within him. The Nomu, despite its monstrous strength, took a step back, its eyes wide with confusion, as though it was struggling against the pressure. Izuku was no longer just a student. In that moment, he was a force of nature, a will so strong that even the Nomu, a creature designed to destroy, faltered before it. He could feel it, that undeniable weight of his own spirit pushing back against the darkness that threatened to consume them all. Bakugo, who had been recovering from his earlier defeat, watched in stunned silence as the Nomu faltered, as if it had been struck by an invisible blow. The air around Izuku seemed to bend, and for the first time, Bakugo's eyes widened in realization. No way, did he just? Todoroki, too, looked on in awe. He had felt the oppressive weight of Izuku's Haki, the intense pressure that had nearly knocked the wind from his lungs. It was a force beyond their comprehension, something more than just quirks, something that transcended the limits of their world. Momo, regaining her senses, turned to see the Nomu retreating, taking a step back as if it were afraid. She could hardly believe what she was seeing. Izuku, their classmate, was radiating a power so intense that even the mightiest of monsters couldn't help but shrink before it. "Deku," Momo whispered, her voice filled with disbelief and awe. She had never seen anything like this before. It was as if Izuku had transcended his limits, unlocked a power within him that no one could have anticipated. Shigaraki, realizing the shift in momentum, took a step back, his fingers twitching nervously. "This isn't over," he muttered under his breath, but even he couldn't ignore the overwhelming presence that Izuku was exuding. It was as though the scales had tipped in their favor. Izuku, his body trembling from the force of the Haki that still radiated from him, knew that this was only the beginning. He couldn't let up now. Not while his friends were still in danger. Not while Aizawa-sensei lay broken and bleeding on the ground. He would give everything to protect them. The Nomu might have been powerful, but Izuku wasn't about to let it win. Not while there was still breath in his body. My breath came in ragged gasps, my body barely holding together. Haki had pushed me beyond my limits, and the price was catching up. The Nomu stood there, regenerating, the damage I dealt vanishing as if it had never happened. My grip on my sword faltered. I took a step back. My vision blurred. This thing, it was made to fight all might. I was never supposed to win. But that didn't mean I could stop. Momo rushed to my side, her face twisted with worry. "Midoriya, you're hurt, you need to stop." I could barely form words. Not done yet, but my body had other plans. My knees buckled, my sword slipped from my grip, and I collapsed. I felt her catch me, barely keeping me upright. My head rested against her shoulder. She was trembling. "You idiot," she whispered. "Why do you always push yourself this far?" The Nomu roared. I felt Momo tense up, her arms tightening around me. We were out of time. Then the doors blasted open. A golden streak of light crashed into the battlefield, and a booming voice followed. "I am here." All Might arrived, and with him, hope. The room shook as he squared off against the Nomu, his presence enough to push the villains back. Kurogiri hesitated, his misty form wavering. Momo was still holding me. "Midoriya, just stay with me, okay? Help is here. You don't have to fight anymore." I tried to respond, but darkness was already closing in. My body had nothing left to give. The last thing I saw before everything faded was All Might charging at the Nomu, muscles flexing, the fight truly beginning. When I came to, I was lying on the ground, my head throbbing. The sounds of battle echoed around me, shockwaves from each punch, the wind howling with every strike. My body refused to move, but I could still see the fight. All Might was giving everything he had. Blow after blow, he drove into the Nomu, but it just kept regenerating. The villain's shock absorption made it nearly impossible to do lasting damage. The battlefield trembled as the two titans clashed. All Might ducked beneath a massive swipe from the Nomu, his muscles bulging as he retaliated with an uppercut that sent the creature skidding back. The air itself seemed to ripple from the force. But the Nomu barely staggered before launching forward again. It was adapting, its movements becoming sharper, faster. All Might gritted his teeth, weaving around its relentless strikes, each one powerful enough to break concrete. You can take my punches, All Might growled, catching the Nomu's arm mid-swing, but let's see how you handle real power. He twisted, hurling the Nomu into a collapsed section of the building. Dust and debris exploded into the air, but before the dust could settle, the Nomu lunged out, unharmed. It slammed into All Might, sending him crashing through several pillars. For the first time, I saw worry flicker in All Might's eyes. The Nomu had no limit to its endurance. Every punch All Might landed, every ounce of force he exerted, it healed from it almost instantly. If this kept up, All Might clenched his fists. He had to end this. Now, his muscles tensed, his body vibrating with raw power. He launched forward, faster than the eye could track, and unleashed a flurry of punches. Each strike landed with enough force to create shockwaves that shattered the floor beneath them. The Nomu screeched as the overwhelming barrage pushed it back. You may be made to withstand my punches. All Might's voice was thunderous. But can you withstand an unstoppable force? The Nomu let out a distorted screech, its body contorting from the sheer force of All Might's relentless attacks. Its healing couldn't keep up. Cracks formed along its limbs, the flesh barely knitting together before another devastating punch shattered it again. All Might's eyes burned with determination. I won't let you hurt them. He grabbed the Nomu by the arm, twisting its limb with bone-snapping force, and hurled it into the ceiling. Before it could fall back down, he leapt up, driving a knee into its chest, sending shockwaves through the building. The Nomu coughed out a distorted growl, reaching for him with its remaining strength. But All Might didn't stop. Plus, he pulled back his fist, air spiraling around it. Ultra. The final punch sent the Nomu flying straight out of the USJ, vanishing into the sky. The force cracked the walls, shattered windows, and left a crater where the villain once stood. Silence fell. The League of Villains stood frozen. Kurogiri and Shigaraki stared in disbelief. Then, Shigaraki growled, "This isn't over." Kurogiri, retreat. The mist swirled. A second later, they were gone. All Might straightened, his form shaking. He turned, his gaze landing on us. His eyes softened when he saw me. Midoriya, you did well. I barely heard him before the darkness took me again. I woke up in the infirmary, the pain dull but constant. Momo was sitting beside me, her eyes red and tired. When she saw me stir, relief flooded her expression. You're awake. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry. She handed me a glass of water, and I took a slow sip. What happened? My voice was hoarse. You passed out. The villains retreated. All Might saved us. We won. I let out a weak chuckle. Didn't feel like winning. She shook her head, a small smile on her lips. You were amazing. Reckless, but amazing. I looked away. I didn't feel amazing. I felt weak, like I had barely mattered in the grand scheme of things. But as Momo placed a hand over mine, her warmth grounding me, I realized, maybe I didn't have to do this alone. The room was still, the tension thick even in the aftermath. Outside the infirmary, I could hear the murmurs of the other students. They had all been shaken. The attack was supposed to be impossible. Yet it happened. Aizawa was injured but alive. 13 had been taken in for recovery. Iida had successfully escaped and alerted the school. The plan had worked, but barely. I looked down at my bandaged arms. The scars of this fight wouldn't fade easily. Momo still hadn't let go of my hand. I turned to her, seeing something lingering in her expression, something unspoken. Momo, I said, my voice quieter now. You stayed. Her grip tightened. Of course, I did. My eyes fluttered open, the ceiling above me sterile white and quiet. For a second, I thought I was back home in bed, before the aches hit me all at once. Every limb felt like it had been hit by a truck, twice. Infirmary, I mumbled, groaning. Midoriya, I turned my head. Momo was there, curled up in a chair next to my bed, dark circles under her eyes, a book cradled in her lap. She was up in an instant, setting the book aside and leaning toward me. You're awake. Relief washed over her face. I tried to sit up, but pain shot through my side. How long? 2 days. She poured water into a cup and handed it to me. You've been unconscious since the USJ. 2 days. Images flooded back. Nomu's roar, the sound of All Might's fists crashing through the air, Momo's arms around me, the unbearable strain of my Haki burning me from the inside. I sipped the water slowly. Is everyone okay? She nodded. Mr. Aizawa and 13 are recovering. No casualties, thanks to Ida getting help. Everyone's shaken, but alive. A heavy breath left me. Good. Her eyes studied me. You really scared me. I looked down, ashamed. Sorry. Don't apologize. Her fingers curled around mine. You were trying to protect everyone. But you don't have to carry it alone. Silence lingered between us, warm and a little heavy. I pushed my Haki too far, I muttered, more to myself than to her. I blacked out before the fight even ended. It's not weakness, she said softly. You held that monster off long enough for help to come. That's strength. I looked up at her, and for a second, her words made me believe it. Maybe I wasn't completely useless. The next day, I was cleared to walk. Barely. My muscles ached, but I couldn't sit still. Recovery girl warned me not to push it, but pushing limits was kind of my thing. I needed to understand what had happened. Conqueror's Haki, the sheer force of will that exploded from me and knocked out dozens of villains, wasn't something I fully controlled. It came in bursts, unpredictable and wild. Haki was my quirk, but if I couldn't master it, I'd be a danger to everyone. I stood in the empty training hall, wearing a borrowed gym uniform, sword sheathed at my back. Momo insisted on coming with me. I'll watch, she said. In case anything happens. I nodded. I sat cross-legged in the center of the room, closed my eyes, and breathed deep. I focused inward, where the storm always brewed, where my will twisted and surged. I reached for it gently. My mind splintered. Voices, pressure, pain. A tidal wave of raw presence screamed from inside me. My heartbeat sped up. The air crackled. No, I hissed. Not yet. I forced it down. Slowly. My temples throbbed. The pressure faded like steam in cold air. Control. I opened my eyes to find Momo kneeling beside me, her hand hovering over mine, worry etched on her face. That was better than last time, I said, managing a small smile. You didn't pass out, she offered. Progress, I muttered. Over the next hour, I practiced pushing and pulling the Haki from within, learning to find its edges, to ride its intensity without being swallowed whole. Armament Haki was easier. I could summon it across my skin like armor. Observation came in flickers, like faint echoes before sound. But Conquerors, that one fought back. That night, we sat in the dorm common area. The mood was quiet, everyone still reeling from the USJ. I sat on the couch, ice on my shoulder, flipping through a notebook. Momo joined me, her voice low. You were talking in your sleep earlier. I blinked. What did I say? She hesitated. You kept saying, I wasn't strong enough. The words hit harder than I expected. I looked away. I meant it, I whispered. The Nomu, I could barely scratch it. You weren't supposed to beat it, she said. Even All Might struggled, but you stood up to it anyway. That matters. I didn't respond. Her hand found mine again. You're not alone in this, Midoriya. I squeezed her fingers. I know. The next day, we returned to class. Aizawa stood at the front, face wrapped in bandages, one eye visible. Despite his injuries, he didn't waste time with pleasantries. We're not letting that attack define us, he said. You're here to become heroes. So your next challenge. He clicked a remote. The words UA, Sports Festival filled the screen. Excited murmurs rippled through the class. Wait, already, Kaminari blurted. We just survived a villain attack. This isn't a school play, Aizawa said flatly. Villains will always be out there. But this event is your chance to stand out, to show what you're capable of. The world will be watching. My stomach twisted. Momo glanced at me, as if reading my nerves. This is how pro agencies scout new talent, Aizawa continued. And this year, it means even more. After what happened, all eyes will be on you. Show them what you're made of. Bakugo cracked his knuckles, his usual scowl in place. TCH. Fine, I'll crush everyone. Like hell you will. Hiroshima shot back, grinning. As the noise picked up, I stayed quiet, turning the words over in my head. A public stage, a spotlight, and another chance to lose control. But also, another chance to prove I was more than a burden. More than a fluke with a quirk I barely understood. Later that afternoon, I was back in the training hall. Alone this time, the memory of Nomu towered in my mind like a shadow. Again, I muttered. I focused. The power inside me responded, hot and alive. I didn't force it. I coaxed it. Asked it to meet me halfway. A pulse rippled out. Just a small one. The walls didn't crack. The floor didn't tremble. But I stayed conscious. And I smiled. Back in the dorms, I found Momo in the study lounge, drafting battle strategies for the festival. She looked up as I entered. Hey, she said. Did you pass out again? Nope, I said proudly. Actually made progress. She raised an eyebrow. Color me impressed. I flopped into the chair beside her. Thanks for being there. I know I'm a mess right now. She was quiet for a beat. Then, you're not a mess. You're growing. And I'd rather be here for that than anywhere else. Something warm curled in my chest. I looked at her, and for a second, neither of us spoke. Still, she added, smirking, try not to explode during the festival. I'd prefer not to get knocked out by your Haki. No promises, I grinned. That night, as I lay in bed, sleep drifting in, I whispered to myself. Control the Haki. Control the fear. Because the world would be watching soon. And I couldn't afford to fall behind. Not anymore. The morning sun bled through the curtains, casting golden streaks across the dorm walls. I blinked slowly, the weight of sleep still tugging at my limbs. For once, I didn't wake up to pain or panic. Just the quiet hum of a new day. Progress. I rolled out of bed, careful with my movements. My muscles were still sore, but it was a dull ache now, less like fire, more like memory. I'd earned every bruise, every crack in my bones. And if I had to, I'd earn more. Because the festival was coming. The world would be watching. And I couldn't look weak. By the time I made it to the cafeteria, most of the class was already there. I spotted Momo immediately, sipping tea while reading from her tablet. She looked up as I approached, her lips curving in a small smile. Sleep well? She asked. I nodded. Yeah, didn't even have a nightmare. That is progress. She shifted slightly, making space beside her. I sat, grabbing a tray of rice and eggs. The others buzzed around us. Hiroshima and Kaminari were talking about potential matchups. Uraraka and Iida were exchanging study notes while Shiro tried to sneak snacks off Mina's plate. The tension from the USJ still lingered, but it was duller now, buried under excitement and nerves for what was coming. Aizawa hadn't been exaggerating. The sports festival wasn't just another event. It was the event, and I'd already heard whispers in the hallways, about me. Isn't that the kid who knocked out villains with his mind? They say he's got some kind of royal quirk. He passed out after. Probably can't even control it. Every word stuck like thorns. I chewed slowly, staring at my plate. You're doing that thing again, Momo said gently. I blinked. What thing? Overthinking until your food gets cold. I laughed, a little sheepish. Right, sorry. Don't apologize. Just eat. We stayed like that for a while, quiet, steady, safe. Until Aizawa's voice crackled over the dorm speakers. All first years report to ground beta. Training begins now. Just like that, breakfast was over. The training ground stretched out ahead of us like a battlefield. Obstacle courses, target dummies, mobility rigs. Nothing fancy, but more than enough to break us. Since the sports festival is public, Aizawa said, walking stiffly across the grass, you'll be evaluated on more than combat ability. Agility, stamina, strategy, crowd control, all of it matters. Bakugo cracked his neck. TCH. Like we need training just to crush extras. Some of you do, Aizawa deadpanned. Others need control. His eyes landed on me. I swallowed hard. You'll be training in pairs, he continued. Team coordination under pressure. These matchups aren't random. They're tailored. My stomach dropped. Midoriya and Yaoyorozu. I blinked. Then looked at Momo. She didn't look surprised. If anything, she looked calm. Like she expected this. Meet in Zone 3, Aizawa said. You'll run tactical simulations. Offense and defense. Show me you're not a liability. Ouch. But I nodded. Momo and I made our way across the compound, passing groups already beginning their drills. Bakugo was paired with Kirishima, their training already half explosion and half yelling match. Uraraka was with Tsuyu, practicing aerial maneuvering. Even Mineta was working with Tokiyami, though he looked terrified of both his partner and the Shadow Beast. Zone 3 was a mock urban layout, cracked streets, fake buildings, alleyways. It looked like a movie set after an apocalypse. Guess we're fighting in the ruins, I muttered. Momo crossed her arms, scanning the space. Tactical combat zone. It's not about raw power. It's about using the terrain, adapting, and staying ahead of the enemy. Sounds like your kind of fight. She glanced at me. Ours. You'll need to trust me. I do. She smiled at that. A voice crackled through a speaker above us. Scenario initiated. Villain ambush. Timer. 10 minutes. Objective. Survive and subdue all threats. Figures emerged from behind rubble. Combat bots in villain gear, their mechanical limbs twitching, glowing red eyes locked onto us. Momo stepped forward, summoning a bow staff from her arm. Ready. I drew my sword. Let's go. The first bot lunged. I dodged, drawing in Haki just enough to coat my blade in a thin shimmer of black. I sliced through the machine's arm, sparks flying. Behind me, Momo spun and cracked her staff into another bot's head, flipping it over with practiced grace. She moved like a general, decisive, calculated. More bots closed in. Left flank, she shouted. I turned, saw 3 incoming, and raised my free hand. A pulse of Conqueror's Haki shot out, not enough to knock them out, but enough to stagger them. I followed up with a sweep of my sword, disabling 2. Momo conjured flashbangs next, hurling them into the alley ahead. The burst of light blinded the last wave. We moved together like a unit, her precision, my force. We covered each other's blind spots, called out targets, adjusted seamlessly. By the end of 10 minutes, the bots were scrap. The voice returned. Simulation complete. Pair status. Passed. I dropped to one knee, panting. My head throbbed, but I was still conscious. Momo knelt beside me, handing over a water bottle. You kept the Haki in check. I took it, breathing deep. Barely. But you did. She said it like it meant something. And maybe it did. Over the next few days, training intensified. Each morning started with team drills. Then came individual quirk assessments. Endurance trials. Strategic games. I pushed my Haki further every day. Tapping into it slowly. Letting it out in waves, not storms. Armament was easier now. I could summon it across my forearms, even coat my blade fully. Observation flickered in and out, but I was learning to predict motion, to feel danger. But conquerors. That one still fought me. At night, I returned to the training hall. Alone sometimes. With Momo others. She'd sit nearby, watching, studying, offering advice without judgment. One night, as I staggered from another failed pulse, she caught me before I hit the ground. You're pushing too hard, she murmured, lowering me to sit against the wall. I have to. Why? I looked at her, eyes heavy. Because if I don't, I'll lose control when it matters most. Her gaze didn't waver. Then let's figure out how to help you not lose it. The next day, she handed me a diagram. A breakdown of my Haki. Intensity spikes, mental strain levels, external indicators. You charted my willpower. Data is power, she said with a shrug. If we can map how it behaves, we can predict when it spikes. It was weirdly comforting. Someone trying to understand me, not just brace for when I broke. By the end of the week, the dorms were buzzing with nervous energy. Costume adjustments, strategy sessions, bragging, doubts. On the eve of the festival, we were granted a free night, no training. Just rest. I found myself on the roof, gazing at the stars. Footsteps joined me. Thought you might be up here, Momo said, sitting beside me. Just needed to clear my head. She folded her hands in her lap. Nervous, terrified, she nodded like that was expected. It's not just about showing off anymore, I said. It's about proving that what happened at USJ wasn't a fluke. That I belong here. You do, she said instantly. You've proven it every day since. I looked at her. You really think so? I know so. We sat in silence for a while, the city lights below flickering like stars of their own. Finally, I asked, why do you keep helping me? I mean, you could partner with anyone. You're brilliant, powerful. I'm unstable. Her eyes met mine, unwavering. Because I believe in you. And because you believe in us. Us. I didn't know what to say. So I said the only thing that mattered. Thanks. She smiled, and it felt like a light in the dark. Just try not to black out tomorrow, she teased gently. No promises. The day of the UA Sports Festival arrived like a tidal wave. Cheers filled the stadium. Reporters swarmed the gates. Cameras hovered like flies. I stood in the tunnel with the rest of Class 1A, waiting for our cue. My heart pounded. Momo stood beside me, her hand brushing mine. Whatever happens out there, she said, we stand together. I nodded. Together. President Mike's voice boomed across the stadium. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the UA High Sports Festival. The gates opened, and we stepped into the light. The starting tunnel was silent, too silent. I could feel it, everyone's nerves coiling like loaded springs. First years from every department packed shoulder to shoulder behind the giant steel gate that separated us from the arena floor. This wasn't just a race. It was a war zone. Momo stood beside me, calm as ever, one hand resting lightly on her belt. Her other hand brushed mine once, quiet support. I didn't move, didn't blink. I let my eyes close. Clear your mind. Don't chase the storm. Become it. Inside, the storm of Haki curled and boiled under my skin like molten iron. I felt the pulse of it. Heavy, demanding, alive. Then President Mike's voice blasted from the arena. And now, the moment you've all been waiting for, Class 1A enters the spotlight. The gate rumbled. Midnight cracked her whip, her smile wide. Your first event is the obstacle race. 4 kilometers of chaos, traps, and carnage. The top 42 make it to the next round. I opened my eyes. The gate dropped. Ready. My heartbeat slowed. I was no longer nervous. I was awake, set. I pulled from deep inside. Not gently this time, but fully. Come out. Go. The world ignited. A wave of Conqueror's Haki exploded out from me like a detonation. A split-second burst. Short, sharp, controlled. A storm made of will. The results were instant. The students closest to me, some from general studies, some from Class 1B, froze mid-step. A few dropped to their knees, eyes wide, breath knocked clean from their lungs. A couple passed out entirely. Even some of the 1A kids hesitated. What the hell was that? Kaminari yelped, staggering. Bakugo flinched, eyes darting toward me with a mixture of fury and surprise. You bastard. Todoroki narrowed his eyes. He didn't stop moving, but he definitely noticed. I didn't wait for them to recover. I moved. Observation Haki flared behind my eyes, turning everything crisp and bright. Every breath, every footstep, I saw their movements a second before they happened. The first obstacle came fast. Giant sentinel robots, easily the size of buildings, stomping down from platforms, swinging massive bladed arms. Everyone bottlenecked in front of them, struggling to dodge or attack. I didn't. I sprinted forward, sword sheathed on my back. Armament. I breathed. Black Haki coated my right arm and legs, thick and smooth as steel. A robot swung down. I leapt. Haki-enhanced legs launching me high into the air. The blade missed by inches. I spun mid-air, drew my sword, and drove it down into the bot's eye as I landed on its shoulder. Sparks burst. The robot screeched, overloaded. I kicked off it and vaulted onto the next. 2 down, I muttered. All around me, the students were still trying to recover from my Haki blast. The ones who hadn't passed out were just now getting their footing. Perfect. I landed, rolled, and cleared the final robot. The ravine. A yawning canyon with unstable rope bridges and steel cables dangling like spiderwebs. Todoroki was ahead now, freezing the cables into pathways, but slow. Too slow. I didn't need a bridge. I needed control. I reached inward again, deep enough that the air around me began to thrum. A pulse of Haki burst from the soles of my feet. I jumped. The pressure exploded beneath me, propelling me forward, not flight, but close. A step of pure willpower. I leapt again. Each landing was barely more than a flicker of contact, a single instant of weight. Airwalk. No, will walk. I crossed the ravine in under 5 seconds. A blur of black pressure and raw instinct. The minefield. The final stretch. Cratered dirt, sunken patches, landmines buried just below the surface. The kids ahead were slowed to a crawl, poking the ground with sticks or dodging each other's blasts. But I didn't stop. Observation Haki flared. I saw it. The subtle shift in energy. The faintest tingle where the traps were. Then I smiled. I can work with this. I ran full speed into the minefield. First step. Boom. The mine launched me up. I twisted in the air and angled myself toward the next one. Boom. Higher now. Another. Another. The chain reaction of explosions launched me like a rocket over the entire final stretch. I sheathed my sword in midair, coated my legs in armament, and braced for impact. I landed hard, cracked the concrete, and rolled twice before sliding across the finish line on one knee. The stadium exploded with cheers. Present Mike screamed into his mic. And the first to finish, in a shocking, dominant performance, Midoriya Izuku from Class 1A. I stayed still for a second, breathing, listening to the silence in my chest. No uncontrolled surges. No blackouts. Control. I stood up, sweat clinging to my face, my heart hammering in a quiet rhythm of pride and disbelief. Behind me, Todoroki crossed second. Bakugo third, furious and cursing under his breath. Momo came in shortly after, fifth, precise and calm. She walked up beside me, brushing dust off her uniform. She glanced at me, smiling, dramatic. I laughed under my breath. It worked. You knocked out 6 people with that opening Haki pulse. Only 6. She nudged me. Next time aim for 10. In the waiting area, students glared at me. Whispers filled the air. That guy from 1A, he's a monster. He used his quirk like it was some kind of king's command. I thought he didn't even place top 10 in the entrance exam. I ignored them. They didn't know me, but they would. I sat on a bench, wrapped my hand around a water bottle, and sipped slowly. My fingers trembled, but not from weakness. From restraint. Momo sat beside me, opening a tablet and going over cavalry battle strategies. I looked up at the screen overhead. My name was in giant bold letters. Midoriya Izuku first place. And for once, I wasn't afraid of the spotlight. The final bell rang, signaling the end of the first round. I could already feel the tension in the air, the students around me whispering in hushed tones. It was almost time. The cavalry battle was coming. But first, Midnight stood up on the stage, a dazzling grin lighting up her face as she took her microphone. All right, everyone, time for the moment you've all been waiting for. Let's go over the top 10 headbands. A dramatic pause. The students gathered around, eagerly waiting for her to continue. Coming in at number 1, and a shock to no one. Midnight's eyes sparkled as she looked straight at me. Midoriya Izuku, with a total of 1 million points. I swear the stadium gasped in unison. The murmurs spread like wildfire through the crowd. 1 million points. It was unheard of. 1 million points. Iida shouted, his eyes wide behind his glasses. That's insane. The reactions from everyone were instant. What the hell, Midoriya? Bakugo growled, gritting his teeth. How the hell do you get 1 million points on the first event? Todoroki, on the other hand, simply raised an eyebrow. There was no anger in his expression, just quiet calculation. I guess he's not someone to underestimate. Momo leaned over to me, her lips curving upward. Looks like you've set the bar high, she said, her voice full of quiet pride. I didn't have the heart to respond right away. I was still processing the number. 1 million. It felt unreal. Midnight continued the announcements, her voice echoing through the arena. Coming in at number 2, Todoroki Shoto, with 250,000 points. Todoroki gave a small nod, but didn't look particularly surprised. Of course, he'd have an impressive score. His power was built for this kind of event. And in third place, Bakugo Katsuki with 230,000 points. Bakugo scoffed, crossing his arms. TCH. Figures. But I'm coming for you, Deku. Number 4, Yaoyorozu Momo, with 150,000 points. Momo gave a small wave to the crowd, her usual composure showing even in the spotlight. I smiled, feeling a little better knowing we were all in this together. The announcements continued, each headband holder getting their moment in the sun, until finally, midnight paused before the number 10 headband. Last but certainly not least, the 10th place headband, worth a substantial 100,000 points, goes to Uraraka Ochako of Class 1A. Uraraka's eyes widened, and she quickly raised a hand to her mouth in shock. It was a well-deserved spot, and I couldn't help but smile. Ochako had always been a powerhouse when it came to her quick thinking and cleverness, but even I had to admit, I didn't expect her to land in the top 10. The crowd erupted in applause. Uraraka waved at them with a huge, stunned smile on her face. I didn't expect this, but thank you. Her reaction was pure joy and surprise. It was a moment she'd definitely earned after all her hard work. I couldn't be happier for her. The other students started reacting. Momo shot me a glance, her voice low. Looks like Ochako is making a real mark. I've always thought she had it in her, I said, watching Uraraka absorb the attention. She's been pushing herself more than she lets on. Bakugo, on the other hand, didn't look too happy about the whole situation. He crossed his arms, eyes narrowed. TCH, number 10. Guess I can't overlook her anymore. She might actually be dangerous. Todoroki simply observed the situation with his usual calm. He nodded slightly toward Uraraka. She's earned her place. With the top 10 headbands revealed, Midnight clapped her hands together. Now, let's move on to the cavalry battle. Remember, this is a team event, and the rules are simple. The 3 teams with the most points at the end will move on. You can steal headbands from other teams by taking them off their heads. But be careful, losing your headband means you're out. Teams quickly started forming. I knew I had to pick my team carefully, especially after the sheer chaos of the last event. Momo, you're with me, right? I asked. She didn't hesitate. Of course, I already have some ideas for our strategy. We were joined by Siro, who had been hanging out near us during the break. He was a bit too quiet for someone who usually had a lot to say, but his quirk would be useful for this event. Hey, Siro, want to join us? I asked. You're pretty quick with those tape tricks. We could use the mobility. Siro grinned. You're right, I've been dying to be on a team with you too. Just like that, our team was set. But there was no time to waste. The other teams were already starting to gather. Bakugo had immediately grabbed Kirishima and Kaminari, their fire and electric mix looking like a solid combo. Todoroki, true to form, had gone with his usual cool approach. He teamed up with Iida and Tsuyu. They were a strange combination, but I couldn't deny how effective they'd be. Iida's speed, Tsuyu's versatility, and Todoroki's sheer power made them formidable. And of course, there were teams that formed based on necessity. Mineta was trying to pair with anyone who would listen, but it was clear his reputation was starting to backfire. He ended up with a new Class 1B student and a quiet girl from Class 1A whose quirk was hard to place. The countdown began. The tension was palpable. We were all gearing up for the battle ahead. As the countdown hit 0, Midnight waved her arm high. And with that, the cavalry battle begins. I checked my headband one last time. 1,000,000 points. 1,000,000 targets. Let's do this, I muttered under my breath. The stadium hummed with energy, the roar of the crowd still echoing in my ears. My body was spent. Legs like jelly, chest rising and falling with each breath, but there was a different kind of exhaustion to it this time. I'd pushed myself, and I'd come out on top. Momo sat beside me, her eyes scanning the arena while occasionally glancing down at the tablet in her hands. We were both resting, but I could feel her mind already moving toward the next challenge. Her steady, calculated nature never seemed to fade, even in the heat of battle. That's what made her an incredible partner. But as the others filtered in and the adrenaline began to wear off, the reality of what I had done hit me. I had crushed the first event. No, dominated it. And now, the spotlight was on me. Midoriya, Kaminari called out, waving as he walked toward me, his face split in an eager grin. Dude, that was crazy. What was that at the start of the race? A pulse of pure will. That was epic. I gave a small smile, too tired to truly muster anything bigger. Yeah, I guess it was. Just had to clear my head. He chuckled and sat down next to me. Clear your head. That's one way to do it. You nearly flattened half of 1B, man. I winced at the thought. I didn't mean to, but the surge of Conqueror's Haki had been almost instinctual. My heart had been racing, and all I could think about was breaking through the chaos ahead of me. The fact that it had knocked so many people out was a side effect I hadn't accounted for. I didn't have full control yet, but for once, it had worked in my favor. I didn't expect it to go that far, I admitted, running a hand through my hair. Guess I need to be more careful. Be careful. Kaminari shot me a look. You were amazing out there. You blew everyone away. No one can stop you now. I wasn't so sure about that. If there was one thing I'd learned from this event so far, it was that nothing was ever truly set in stone. Bakugo's voice suddenly cut through the noise. Stop your damn yammering, you idiot, he snarled at Kaminari, who shut his mouth with a snap. Bakugo walked over to me, his usual scowl firmly in place. You pulled some weird stunt with your quirk, but don't get cocky, Deku. This is just the first round. I looked up at him, eyes narrowing. Don't worry, I'm not planning to take it easy on anyone. His lips twitched at the challenge but he didn't respond. Instead, he turned and headed toward the others, probably readying himself for the next battle. But as much as Bakugo grated on me, I couldn't deny that his fierce determination pushed me to do better. It was an unspoken competition between us, and it was exactly what I needed. Midoriya, Aizawa's voice suddenly came through the loudspeakers, pulling everyone's attention toward the front of the arena. The next event will begin shortly. All students, prepare yourselves for the cavalry battle. The energy in the stadium shifted. The crowd's cheers grew louder, and the students around me began to adjust their gear, tightening their uniforms and fixing their helmets. I stood up slowly, stretching out my sore limbs. This is it, I murmured to Momo, who nodded. The cavalry battle will be a test of teamwork, strategy, and endurance, she said, her voice steady as always. We need to work together and anticipate the other team's movements. Yeah, I muttered, already running through different strategies in my head. The battle wouldn't be about individual strength like the race. It would be about outsmarting everyone else, reading the flow of the fight, and working as a unit. My Haki would help, but it wasn't a guarantee. This was more than just raw power. It was chess, and I needed to think several moves ahead. Aizawa continued, his voice echoing through the arena. The rules are simple. Each team will consist of 4 people. The objective is to steal the opposing team's headbands while defending your own. The top 3 teams will advance to the final round. The timer is set for 20 minutes. The first team to capture the most headbands will be declared the winner. A murmur rippled through the students. I could see the excitement, the nerves, the hunger for victory. But all I could think about was the strategy. What do you think? I asked Momo, turning toward her. Any ideas for how we should split up? She looked at me for a long moment, her eyes sharp as she considered our options. We'll need to have a solid defense while also being unpredictable on the offensive. You should be the primary attacker. Your speed and strength will be useful for disrupting the other teams. I'll be the one to cover our back and provide support when needed. Got it, I said, giving a firm nod. I'll take point, but we'll need someone with good range, too. I can provide that, she said, adjusting the items on her belt. I'll create distractions when necessary. I looked around at the rest of the class. Most of the teams were already forming up. Todoroki, Bakugo, and the others were in tight groups, all with their own plans. I could feel the tension mounting. You good? I asked Momo one last time. She smiled, though it was small, almost to herself. I'm ready, a voice shouted from across the field. Class 1A, report to the starting area. We moved together, walking toward the marked zone where the rest of the first years were already gathering. I could feel the weight of the crowd's anticipation, their eyes locked on us. It was no longer about me. It was about all of us. And if we wanted to win, We needed to trust each other. The countdown began. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The horn sounded, and everything erupted into chaos. The first few seconds were a blur. I moved with the crowd, dodging incoming attacks and avoiding the first few headbands that flew my way. I used my observation Haki to track movement, to anticipate where the enemies would be and when they'd strike. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough to give me the edge. Momo had already created several barriers with her quirk, blocking attacks from other teams while ensuring that we could regroup at any moment. "We need to split them up," she shouted, her voice cutting through the noise of battle. "Keep them off balance." I nodded and charged forward, my sword drawn. The first team I encountered was a mix of 1B students, and they were already moving in a tight formation. But they weren't prepared for the speed with which I descended on them. I burst through their ranks with my enhanced speed, dodging a few poorly aimed attacks and using my sword to knock a few weapons out of the way. One of them reached for my headband, but I saw it coming and swiped it out of his hand, sending him stumbling back. Behind me, Momo's voice echoed as she deployed more flashbangs to confuse the enemy team. It worked. The 1B group staggered, momentarily disoriented. "Go," Momo shouted, and I didn't need to be told twice. I sprinted forward, picking off 2 more students as I went, careful to stay ahead of their counterattacks. I saw Todoroki and Bakugo in the distance, already heading for another team. But there was no time to waste thinking about them. I had a job to do. Using the terrain to my advantage, I leapt over obstacles and wove through groups of students, relying on the feedback of my Haki to make split-second decisions. There were plenty of traps, plenty of teams that tried to surround me, but my focus was on the headbands. One by one, I disabled their attempts, taking their headbands without hesitation. The arena was a war zone, with flashes of light and the sound of collisions ringing out everywhere. Momo kept up the pressure, using her versatility to create barricades, traps, and smoke screens that allowed me to push forward. She was always one step ahead, constantly analyzing the flow of battle. By the time the first 10 minutes had passed, we had 3 headbands. But I wasn't satisfied. We needed more. "I'll keep pushing," I said, looking at Momo. "Cover me." She nodded, her eyes focused. "I will." I charged again, weaving through students and knocking out enemies as I moved forward. Every time I captured a headband, it felt like a small victory. But the end of the battle was still too far away. We were in the lead. But the real fight was just beginning. The minutes ticked by, the battle between the teams intensifying with every passing second. My legs burned from the constant sprinting, my sword a blur as I swiped through the chaotic battlefield. Momo's voice, clear and commanding, kept me grounded as I pushed forward, each move more instinctual than the last. The constant hum of energy from the crowd was a distant background noise. The only thing that mattered now was the fight, my team, our strategy, and my Haki. I could feel the presence of other teams around me, all of them jockeying for position as they sought to capture headbands and steal away any advantage they could. My Haki was stretched to its limit, trying to track every movement, anticipate every attack. There were too many targets, too many angles to watch, but I couldn't afford to fail. I dodged another attack from a student on the left, narrowly avoiding a well-aimed projectile. My arm shot out, my hand finding the headband of a student who had gotten too close. With a sharp twist, I ripped it from their neck and continued my forward momentum without breaking my stride. But just as I was about to turn to grab another headband, something cold, like a creeping chill, washed over me. My eyes flicked to the right. Todoroki. He was gliding effortlessly through the battlefield, a look of pure focus on his face as ice bloomed around him, freezing enemies in place with brutal efficiency. Bakugo was right beside him, hurling explosive bursts of energy at anything that moved. Their teamwork was undeniable, but there was something else, something in the way Todoroki's icy gaze flicked to me, then to Momo, that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. They were gunning for us. I couldn't waste time worrying about them, not yet, but their presence was a reminder. Todoroki was one of the best at anticipating his opponent's moves. Bakugo's raw power was a constant threat. They were a pair that would test us. Momo was still with me, keeping her distance but always nearby, ready to create another wall of defense if needed. I could see her eyes darting from side to side, calculating the next move. We were a team, and I trusted her completely. Then, in a flash of movement, a group from Class 1B attacked, hoping to catch me off guard. Their leader, a tall, broad-shouldered guy the first didn't recognize, lunged forward, attempting to swipe at my headband with a well-aimed swipe of his own. But I saw it coming a split second before he moved. Not today, I muttered to myself. I dodged, shifting to the left and parrying his attack with a quick strike of my sword. His weapon clanged against mine, sparks flying. In that moment, I could sense the frustration radiating from him. He wasn't used to being outclassed. I didn't give him the chance to regroup. I was already moving again, faster than I should have been able to, driven by the sheer focus my Haki provided. But as soon as I turned, another student leapt into my path. He was smaller, quick, but I had the advantage. His headband was within reach, but I could already feel a disturbance, a shift in the air around us. I looked up, barely managing to sidestep the ice spike that erupted from the ground, aiming straight for my chest. Todoroki. His ice was fast, unforgiving. It almost reached me, but I cut through the thin barrier he had made, my sword slicing the frozen trap in half. His eyes met mine across the field, and for a split second, it felt like time froze. I could see the challenge in his gaze. He wasn't just trying to win. He wanted to test me. I pushed back the instinct to get caught up in the challenge and focused. I needed to keep my head in the game. A sudden cry broke my concentration. A student from 1B was making a run for Momo. I turned, but before I could react, Momo was already one step ahead. Her eyes had caught the movement, and her quick thinking had set up a wall of steel-like barriers, cutting off the would-be thief. Nice work, I called out to her, relieved that she had everything under control. But the battle wasn't over. Far from it. The other teams were relentless, and their attacks were becoming more coordinated. I spotted a team from Class 1C, led by a girl with bright green hair. She was fast, too, using agility to stay just out of reach. But she wasn't as strong as she thought. I could see through her strategy in an instant. She relied too much on speed. Speed could be countered by Haki. With a sharp burst of energy, I slammed my sword into the ground, sending a ripple of force across the battlefield. It wasn't a full blast of my Conqueror's Haki, but the wave was enough to throw her off balance, sending her and her teammates scrambling. I didn't wait for them to recover. I moved in, grabbing another headband from one of their team members while they struggled to right themselves. I could feel the weight of the event settling in. I was no longer just fighting for a spot in the sports festival. I was fighting to prove that I had control, that I could hold my ground against the others. The pressure mounted, but I refused to let it break me. This was my moment. I wasn't going to squander it. Another flash of ice caught my attention, and I darted to the left, narrowly avoiding an attack from Todoroki. His cold gaze locked onto me, but this time, there was something else in it. A faint respect. I didn't have time to dwell on it. The arena was too full of threats. Bakugo was somewhere in the distance, probably preparing another round of explosives. The noise of the battle crescendoed as the final minutes neared. "We've got 2 more headbands," Momo shouted over the din, her eyes scanning the area. "We're almost at the top." I nodded, already planning my next move. We had a slight lead, but the other teams were closing in. I couldn't let up. Not now. But just as I was about to spring into action again, the ground beneath me rumbled. It was a small tremor, but it was enough to set off a chain of events. A massive explosion erupted from the far side of the field, scattering everyone in its path. Bakugo. He had gone all in. The explosion sent everyone scrambling, but I didn't flinch. I used the blast's cover to dash for the headbands of 2 stunned students, claiming them quickly before they could react. The end was near. There was only a few minutes left on the clock. The final rush for headbands had begun. "Go." Momo's voice was urgent, and I didn't hesitate. I dashed forward, my focus narrowing. It was do or die now. The final moments of the battle were a blur. The last few seconds felt like an eternity as the countdown continued. 10 seconds. The loudspeaker blared. My heart hammered in my chest as I sprinted through the battlefield, eyes locked on the last headband I needed. It was dangling from a student's neck, just within reach. I didn't hold back. With a roar, I used my speed, my sword, and my Haki to force my way through the chaos. The last headband was mine. The horn blared. The arena went silent for a split second. And then the crowd erupted into applause. We had done it. We had won. To be continued. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and make sure to like and please hype this video. Now we will see you in the next video.